where last we left off, we were kind of at least halfway through chapter 14 of Genesis, the Aramaic Targum, and we're going to be going through 14 into 15 this week. Michael, would you like to open us up reading it?
Sounds good. So I'll start with the Melchizedek scripture in Genesis 14. This is the Palestinian Targum. I'm going to start on verse 18. So if Josh can pull that up. Palestinian Targum, Genesis 14:18. And Melchizedek, who was Shem bar Noah, the king of Jerusalem, came forth to meet Abram, and brought forth to him bread and wine. In that time he ministered before Eloha Alaha. And he said, Blessed be Abram of the Lord God Most High, who for the righteous possesseth the heavens and the earth. And blessed be Eloha Alaha, who had made thine enemies as a shield which receiveth a blow. And he gave to him one of the 10 of all which he brought back. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the souls of the men of my people, whom thou hast brought back, and the substance take to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have uplifted my hands in an oath before the Lord God Most High, who for the just possesseth his possession of the heavens and the earth. If from a thread to the latchet of a sandal I receive anything of all that is thine, lest thou magnify thyself in saying, I have enriched Abram from mine own. Have I not power over all the spoil, apart from what the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me? Anar, Eshcol, and Mamre, they also receiving their portion. I'm going to give Noah the first option here on Melchizedek. Off to Noah.
I was I was fumbling to get my microphone back on. All right. Yes. So let me pull this up here. All right. So as you can see here, I mean, obviously the Aramaic Targum, it's going straight for the Shem Bar Noah explanation. The in the Masoretic, it doesn't say Shem, and that leads many of us to debate who Melchizedek is, particularly in Hebrews. And that came up to me recently, and I don't know if Michael's gonna be commenting on it. I'm not going to be commenting on it either, but some people think that the writers of Hebrews believed that Melchizedek was Messiah. And that's something for you all to look into. Maybe Mike will comment on that. What I wanted to do is look at a few different passages here, and I'm going to read a bedtime story for you tonight. So you guys can all get tucked in and comfy. I know John has got a cigar lit. And well, the first, let's just go over this here. This is Jasher. Obviously, the book of Jasher goes with the Shem narrative as well. And it says, and Melchizedek, king of Yerushalayim, the same was Shem. So they tell you, like, Melchizedek was, or Melchizedek was Shem, went out with his men to meet Abram and his people with bread and wine, and they remained together in the valley of Melech. All right. And then we see in the writings of Abraham, chapter 95, same events. This is what it says. When the king of Sodom heard that I had returned from the conquest of Amraphel, son of Nimrod, king of Shinar, he came forth to meet me at the valley of Shaveh, which is west of the city of Shalom, where Noah and Melchizedek dwelt. So that's interesting right there, that it's saying it's identifying Melchizedek with a companion of Noah. And one of the big debates that people are bringing to the table now, particularly as we're looking at the timeline of the LXX versus the Masoretic, is that if the Masoretic compresses the years after the flood, leading up to Abraham, they take out several hundred years at least. I'd have to look at it again. They take out a lot of years, and and so if you're going off the Masoretic, it looks more like they're all contemporaries of each other. Nimrod, um, uh, Shem, Noah, and Abraham. When you get to the LXX, all of a sudden you're like, what's going on here? Because now they seem insanely old. Well, I've pointed this out before, that I believe the city of Shalom, and I'm not just saying this just to say it. I mean, my research had already led me to believe that there was something very supernatural going on here. That the city of Shalom, where Shem, Bar Noah, and as well as Noah, that it was a supernatural place. It was an actual portal to heaven, essentially. and going to Shem school meant that you were it was something really special. So the very fact that he's a Melchizedek here tells me that he somehow circumnavigated Sheol. Shem was one of those who became an ascended, an angelic creature. So there's that. All right. What I wanted to do though tonight is, and I don't think I'll be stomping on Michael's research here by doing this, is I'm going to be reading from a portion from Second Enoch. I have never read this before, and I've talked about it probably for over a year. I've mentioned it in a few of my papers, and I feel like it's finally time to read it. Now, quick history lesson here, or literature lesson. In First Enoch, the book of First Enoch, the very last few chapters actually don't come from Enoch at all. And I actually think that the book of Enoch was probably like 5 different books. I don't think it was written that way. I think they assembled it at a later time. But the very end of it is a section from the lost book of Noah. We know that Noah authored at least one work according to Jubilees, and it's a very interesting story at the end of First Enoch. Well, the second Enoch ends the same way with another portion of the lost book of Noah, and these are so enticing. What we get just in little sections, I'm like, man, I really wish we had these books. But this tells about the first Melchizedek, and it wasn't Shem. All right. So uh, basically, to give the conclusion here is my belief is that Shem was named. He named himself Melchizedek, or was given the title based upon his cousin. His cousin before the flood was the first Melchizedek. So here it goes. This is from chapter 71 of Second Enoch. Behold, the wife of Ner. Now Ner is Noah's brother, whose name was Sopanim, being sterile and never having at any time given birth to a child by Ner. And so now keep in mind, she's not a virgin, all right? She's not a virgin. She just is incapable of having children, similar to Sarah with Abraham. And Sopanim was in the time of her old age and in the day of her death. She conceived in her womb, but Ner the priest. So what is Ner a priest of? Again, he's Noah's brother. What is he a priest of? He's part of the Melchizedek order. Had not slept with her, nor had he touched her from the day that Yahuwah had appointed him to conduct the liturgy in front of the face of the people. And when Sopanim saw her pregnancy, she was ashamed and embarrassed, and she hid herself during all the days until she gave birth. And not one of the people knew about it. And when 282 days had been completed, and the day of birth had begun to approach, and Ner remembered his wife, and he called her to himself in his house so that he might converse with her. And Sopanim came to Ner, her husband, and behold, she was pregnant. I would imagine you'd look pretty pregnant by 282 days. And the day appointed for giving birth was drawing near. And Ner saw her, and he became very ashamed. And he said to her, what is this that you have done, O wife? And why have you disgraced me in front of the face of these people? And now depart from me and go where you began the disgrace of your womb. He's basically saying, go back to your adulterous lover, so that I might not defile my hand on account of you and sin in front of the face of Yahuwah. And so Panem spoke to Ner, her husband, saying, O my Adonai, behold, it is the time of my old age, and the day of my death has arrived. I do not understand how my menopause and the barrenness of my womb have been reversed. It's an interesting word there, menopause. I don't know if the ancients would have used that word, but that's the translation from the 1800s. So it's kind of interesting. And Ner did not believe his wife. And for the second time, he said to her, depart from me, or else I might assault you and commit a sin in front of the face of Yahuwah. So he is verbally, he's like, I'm going to get out of here before I hit you, because that's how angry I am. I can't believe you would do this to me. This is so embarrassing. And it came to pass when Ner had spoken to his wife, Sopanim, that Sopanim fell down at Ner's feet and died. Now, keep in mind, it already explained she was already on her deathbed. She was getting ready to die. And she explained, like, I'm about ready to die here. I don't know why I'm pregnant. And, Please don't be angry with me." Nur was extremely distressed, and he said in his heart, "Could this have happened because of my word? Since by word and thought a person can sin in front of the face of Yahuwah?" And that's fascinating. He's saying there that it's not just actions that cause us to sin; it's our very thoughts. That's straight out of Yahushua's teachings. Now, my Elohim, have mercy upon me. I know in truth in my heart that my hand was not upon her. And so I say, Glory to you, O Yahuwah, or O Adonai, because no one among mankind knows about this deed which Yahuwah has done. And Ner hurried, and he shut the door of his house, and he went to Noah, his brother, and he reported to him everything that had happened in connection with his wife. And Noah hurried. He came with Ner, his brother. He came into Ner's house because of the death of Sopanim, and they discussed between themselves how her womb was at the time of giving birth. And Noah said to Ner, "Don't let yourself be sorrowful, Ner, my brother, for Yahuwah today has covered up our scandal, in that nobody from the people know this." So this is kind of interesting. Noah's thinking about covering this up. He's thinking this is pretty embarrassing too. He's trying to save, his brother's reputation. But I mean, this is the guy building the ark, right? He's a righteous, holy guy. Think about the scandal. Now, let us go quickly and let us bury her secretly, and Yahuwah will cover up the scandal of our shame. Because remember now in Torah, if someone undressed her and had relations with her, they uncovered their nakedness or the brother's nakedness, and I guess really Noah's too, because Noah's the patriarch of the family. And they placed Sopanim on the bed, and they wrapped her around with black garments. I don't know what the importance of the black garments are, and shut her in the house, prepared for burial. They dug a grave in secret. And a child came out from the dead Sopanim, and he sat on the bed at her side. And Noah and Ner came in to bury Sopanim, and they saw the child. Now, I will remind you that Noah came out in a spectacular fashion as well. I mean, literally glowing, fiery eyes, like singing praises, and freaked out everybody in the house. And uh, according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, Noah's father accused Noah's mom right there of having sex with the Watchers. He's like, "That can't be my child." And she's like, "No, you were the only guy, I guarantee it." Anyways, they saw the child sitting beside the dead Sopanim and wiping his clothing. And Noah and Ner were very terrified with great fear because the child was fully developed physically, like a 3-year-old. And he spoke with his lips and he blessed Yahuwah. And Noah and Ner looked at him, and behold, the badge of priesthood was on his chest, and it was glorious in appearance. I don't know what the badge of priesthood is. That's kind of interesting, but something that they would have identified right away. And Noah and Ner said, "Behold, Elohim is renewing the priesthood from blood related to us, just as he pleases." And so keep in mind here, the context is that by the time Noah was around, like everyone had left for the children of Cain. There was hardly any sons of Elohim left in that area. It was just, obviously at the end, it was Methuselah. He died the year of the flood. And then it was just Noah and his family. Presumably Ner had died by this time too. He didn't even go on the ark. And Noah and Ner hurried, and they washed the child, and they dressed them in the garments of priesthood, and they gave him the holy bread, and he ate it. And they called his name Melchizedek. There it is. And Noah and Ner lifted up the body of Sopanim and divested her of the black garments, and they washed her and they clothed her in exceptionally bright garments, and they built a shrine for her. So that's interesting. So whatever these black garments represented, they've changed their story now. They're like realized, okay, this was a supernatural uh, occurrence. This is Elohim personally interceding, a type of almost immaculate conception, which all seem to coincide with the Melchizedek priesthood. Every time we see it, and so they put her in bright garments. Noah and Ner and Melchizedek came and they buried her publicly. And Noah said to his brother Ner, "Look after this child in secret until the time, because people will become treacherous in all the earth, and they will begin to turn away from Elohim. And having become totally ignorant, they will put him to death." And then Noah went away to his own place, and great lawlessness began to become abundant over all the earth in the days of Ner. And Ner began to worry excessively, especially about the child, saying, "How miserable it is for me, eternal Yahuwah, that in my days all lawlessness has begun to become abundant over the earth. That's kind of like how many of us think, right? Like, why is it in our days that these things happen? And I realize how much nearer our end is and over all the earth on account of the lawlessness of the people. And now, Yahuwah, what is the vision about this child? And what is his destiny? And what will I do for him? Is it possible that he too will be joined with us in the destruction? And Yahuwah heeded Nur and appeared to him in a night vision. He said to him, Nur, the great lawlessness which has come about on the earth among the multitude, which I shall not tolerate. And behold, I desire now to send out a great destruction onto the earth, and everything that stands on the earth shall perish. But concerning the child, don't be anxious, Nur, because in a short while I shall send my um, archistrateg. I don't know what that is. Archistrateg Michael. Oh, I guess that should be archangel. Maybe that's like German or something like that. Maybe. Anyways, Michael, and he will take the child and put him in the paradise of Eden. That's kind of interesting. We see that happen a lot. That's where Enoch went. He went to paradise in Eden. That's where a lot of these people who are taken away are taken there to Eden. In the paradise where Adam was formerly for 7 years. It says 7 years right there. Having so it says that Adam was there for 7 years. So we could I wasn't prepared to match that up with Jubilees and look, but that's an interesting number. Having heaven open all the time up until when he sinned. And this child will not perish along with those who are perishing in this generation, as I have revealed it, so that Melchizedek will be the priest to all holy priests, and I will establish him so that he will be the head of the priests of the future. And Nur arose from his sleep and blessed Yahuwah, who had appeared to him, saying, Blessed be Yahuwah, the Elohim of my fathers, who has told me how he has made a great priest in my day in the womb of Sopanim, my wife, because I had no child in this tribe who might become the great priest. But this is my son and your servant, and you are the great Elohim. See, how much farther does this go on? Let me just check here. Okay, we got a couple more pages, but this is good stuff. Therefore, honor him together with your servants and great priest, with Sit and Enos and Rusi and Abram. I don't know who all these people are. And Prasadam and Malaleel and Sirach and Aruzan and Elim and Enoch. I know who Enoch is. And Methuselah and me, your servant Nur. And behold, Melchizedek will be the head of the 13 priests who existed before. That's kind of interesting. So there's, um, I wonder if there were, see, I didn't come prepared for this, but I wonder that there were 13 um, fathers going down. They were each, you know, the head of the order of the ancients. And afterward, in the last generation, there will be another Melchizedek. Well, isn't that interesting? The first of 12 priests, and the last will be the head of all, great archpriest, the word and the power of Elohim, who will perform miracles greater and more glorious than all the previous ones. So let me read that one more time in case you guys missed that. So he's talking here that this Melchizedek was the 14th priest of the order to come, that there were these high priests going from Adam down, and that the first Melchizedek here would be head priest over them. But in the end, and the very last Melchizedek to come will be the head of all, a great archpriest. He will be the priest of all priests. It says he will be the very word and power of Elohim, who will perform miracles greater and more glorious than all the previous ones. Praise Yah. He, Melchizedek, will be priest and king in the place Akuzan, that is to say, in the center of the earth, where Adam was created, and there will be his final grave. And so that he's saying that the final Melchizedek's going to die in Jerusalem. And in connection with that archpriest, it is written how he also will be buried there, where the center of the earth is, just as Adam also buried his own son there, Abel, whom his brother Cain murdered, for he lay for 3 years unburied until he saw a bird called jackdaw had buried his own young. And by all accounts, we see that Abel went a long time without being buried. That's the first time I've read that his burial coincided with a bird. I know that great confusion has come, and in confusion this generation will come to an end, and everyone will perish, except that no, my brother will be preserved. And afterward there will be a planting from his tribe, and there will be other people, and there will be another Melchizedek, the head of priests, reigning over the people and performing the liturgy for Yahuwah. Again, amen. That's our high priest. And when the child had been 40 days in Nur's tent, Yahuwah said to Michael, "Go down onto the earth to Ner the priest and take my child Melchizedek, who is with them, and place him in the paradise of Eden for preservation. For the time is approaching, and I will pour out all the water onto the earth, and everything that is on the earth will perish." That's interesting right there. It says all the water is coming down. Everything from above, it's all coming down. And Ner did not realize who was speaking to him, and his heart was confused. And he said, "When the people find out about the child, then they will seize him and kill him, because the heart of these people is deceitful in front of the face of Yahuwah." Ner said to the one who was speaking, "The child is not with me, and I don't know who you are." And he who was speaking to me answered, "Don't be frightened, Ner. I am Yahuwah's archangel, archistr. I gotta say this in German. It's archangel, but it's archist, arch, archistrative."
I started excavating this area in 1961. I wasn't even old enough to drive the tune, but people.
Okay. All right. Yahuwah has sent me, and behold, I shall take your child today. I will go with him, and I will place him in the paradise of Eden, and there he will be forever. And when the 12th generation shall come into being, and there will be 1,070 years, and there will be born in that generation a righteous man, and Yahuwah will tell him that he should go out to that mountain where stands the ark of Noah, your brother, and he will find there another Melchizedek who has been living there for 7 years, hiding himself from the people who sacrifice to idols, so that they might not kill him. He will bring him out, and he will be the first priest and king in the city Salim, in the style of Melchizedek, the originator of the priest. The years will be completed up to that time. 3,000. I think that's talking about Shem there, the next Melchizedek. 3,432 from the beginning and the creation of Adam, and from that Melchizedek, the priest, will be 12 in number until the great Igumen, that is to say, leader, will bring out everything visible and invisible. And Ner understood the first dream and believed it. And having answered Michael, he said, "Blessed be Yahuwah, who has glorified you today for me. And now bless your servant Ner, for we are coming close to departure from this world. And take the child and do to him just as Yahuwah said to you." And Michael took the child on the same night on which he had come down, and he took him on his wings, and he placed him in the paradise of Eden. And Ner got up in the morning. He went into his tent, and he did not find the child. And there was instead of joy very great grief, because he had no other son except this one. Thus Ner ended his life, and after him there was no priest among the people. And from that time, great confusion arose on the earth. There's just a few more paragraphs. I'll go ahead and finish this. This is the very end of Second Enoch, and I'll hand it over to Michael. Thanks for your patience. And Yahuwah called Noah unto the Mount Ararat between Assyria and Armenia, in the land of Arabia, beside the ocean. And he said to him, "Make there an ark with 300 lackets in length, and in a width 50 lackets, and in a height 30, and 2 stories in the middle, and a stories of 1 lacket. And of their lackets 300, but of ours also 15,000." This is the first time I've ever read too that the place where it apparently landed is the place that it was lifted up as well. In agreement with this, let's see. Well, let's keep reading that. Okay. Yahuwah Elohim opened the doors of heaven. Rain came onto the earth for 150 days, and all flesh died. And that's kind of the end of it there. So, interesting story. The first Melchizedek. Hopefully, you guys all enjoyed that. And I'm going to hand it back over to Michael.
All right, that was great stuff, and I don't think we'll be stealing thunder. That was good stuff. I didn't even think to go to Second Enoch. Did you finish your 14, or should I split? Do you remember?
I think that's kind of all I had on Melchizedek. So I think you should just go ahead.
Perfect. Sounds great. Okay, so 18. I'm just going to read the KJV. It says, "And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God." And, I was reading that this is the first time that the word priest is used in the Old Testament. I thought that was interesting. Now, I personally believe Adam was a priest, but it did mention it. So I thought that was cool that Melchizedek in the 66, this was the first time a priest was mentioned. I'm going to be posting, I know CRLOAS was asking about links. We don't really have a document, but I will be posting a bunch of pages that you can follow along. There's the first one. This is want to say this is Jeff Benner, but I'm not sure where I got this. The name Melchizedek literally means my king is Sadiq. So my king is just or righteous. Note that it does not mean king of righteousness, as is sometimes claimed by some theologians, since the word Malchi contains a possessive pronoun. So I thought that was interesting, that it means my king is righteous. What do you guys make of that? Obviously, we know Messiah is Melchizedek. A little bit trouble following along with this, but I thought this was interesting. King of righteousness, anointed king, Mashiach, king of peace. Messiah is the prince of peace, priest of the most high God. I like how it does show the verses there. High priest of eternity, both king and priest, No Torah genealogy. The eternal word of God is the Messiah, not a seed of Aaron. Messiah is obviously from Judah. Greater than the Levites, and greater avodah than the high priest and the altar at the tabernacle. Based on the word of oath, I'd have to check that Psalms passage. Let me put it in there. And bot's not working. But and the eternal priesthood, and they both offered bread and wine. And I'll be talking more about that. I found some interesting things on the bread and wine thing. So I like to give all takes on it. Some people don't like it, but some rabbinic thought on Melchizedek. They taught that Melchizedek acted as a priest and handed down Adam's robes to Abraham. I thought that was cool. They also taught that the Melchizedek school was one of 3 places where the Holy Spirit manifested itself. And then they say Melchizedek's blessing yielded prosperity for Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, I just read the KJV. The Palestinian obviously goes a little bit deeper and says, and Melchizedeki, who was Shem bar Noah. So it names him. The king of Yushalayim came forth to meet Abram and brought forth bread and wine. Some thought on Shem and a possible post-mill thing in here. So he was the firstborn son of Noah. He personally served the great patriarch Methuselah, and obviously I think this is Masoretic timeline. We'll get to it in a little bit, but the great patriarch Methuselah for 98 years before the flood, which he knew Adam, and Shem had witnessed firsthand the devastation of the flood and then Yah's judgment. After the deluge, he settled in Salem, where he founded a school for Torah. We always talk about that, the school of Shem. And we've talked about this. Shem was president at the circumcision of Abraham and Ishmael. Isaac studied with him. Rebecca's wife went to visit him when she was struggling with her pregnancy. And when Jacob finally, quote unquote, stole the blessing from Esau, he fled from his brother by going first to Shem's school in Salem. Again, this is rabbinic. But this is the possible post-mill. Shem is considered one of the 4 righteous men of the dispersion period, the period after the flood, in which the descendants of Noah were to command to settle on the earth. Others are Noah, Eber, and Abram, and obviously this says 400 years. But so the dispersion period, you read in James, the 12 tribes are dispersed, right? We're in the dispersion. This comes after the flood. This is saying it's after the flood. And, we always talk about Messiah coming back in the days of Noah. Assume that's the flood, right? So this is saying after coming back, after that day of Noah, I think there's a dispersion. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. And could it possibly be a post-mill worldview where this is kind of shadowing that it's after his coming, second coming? There's a dispersion. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? So some more tradition. They say Melchizedek was the first to initiate and complete a wall, circumference of the city, and had to exit Salem to reach Abram and his men. Obviously, this is talking about Shem. So upon exiting Salem, he presented them bread and wine with the intent to refresh them from their journey. Okay, so they also attribute him as a pioneer in banning prostitution of Shem. So other takes besides the rabbinic on Melchizedek, the Zohar, they think it was Aaron, Kohen Gadol, the high priest. Melchizedek was Aaron. I don't know about that. Josephus refers to Melchizedek as a Canaanite chief in War of the Jews, as a priest in the antiquity of the Jews. Philo identifies Melchizedek with the Logos as priest of God and honored as an untutored priesthood. Actually, I do have something on Second Book of Enoch here, so I'm not going to touch that one. Yeah, he did. Yeah, no mention that Gabriel, Michael, and some of them. Okay. Dead Sea Scrolls found in Cave 11. They say that Melchizedek is seen as a divine being in the text and is referred to as an El or Elohim. Titles usually referred to God. According to this text, Melchizedek seems to appear at the end of days as a heavenly angelic warrior judge and high priest. He atones for the quote-unquote sons of light at the great day of atonement, which introduces the redemption of the final jubilee of history. He defeats Belial and his lot, executing judgment on behalf of God. This was found in Qumran, and I started studying a little bit more on the zodiac, and they're all about the sons of light. I thought this was very interesting that Melchizedek, at least according to these Dead Sea Scrolls, pretty much describes the Messiah. The Qumran scrolls also indicate that he was used as a name of the archangel Michael sometime, interpreted as a heavenly priest. Michael as Melchizedek, contrasted with Belial, who's given the name Melchi Rasha, or king of wickedness. Okay, so I'm not going to read that. Okay, number 19. So this is the bread and wine stuff. So, and he blessed them. Blessed be Abraham of the Lord God, who for righteousness possessed the heaven and the earth. Actually, it wasn't the bread and wine. But all right, well, I'm going to go over the bread and wine now. Now look at this, guys. This was pretty interesting. All the verses I found in the 66 about bread and wine, and as you know, I have an affinity for wisdom. It appears wisdom's kind of in the Melchizedek order. So wisdom has built her house. She has owned her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her animals. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her servant girls. She calls from the highest places in the town. You that are simple, turn in here. Those without sense, she says, come and eat of my bread and drink wine. I've mixed. So she is doing the same thing as a Melchizedek. In that order, it's an order. I don't see where it says it only has to be a male, the Levites. But Proverbs 4, there could be bad bread and wine. So do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of evildoers. Avoid it. Do not go on, turn away from it, and pass on, for they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble, for they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. Ecclesiastes 9. Go eat your bread with enjoyment and drink your wine with a merry heart. That was good. It says, let your garments be white. Do not let oil be lacking on your head. I mean, this is awesome. Enjoy life with your wife, who you love. Isaiah 36 says, make your peace with me and come out to me. Then every one of you will eat from your own vine and your own fig tree. Drink water from your own cistern until I come and take you away to a land like your own. A land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards. Promised land talk right there. Genesis. God give you the dew of the heaven, the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. And then finally, we know this one, Messiah. About the Passover. I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. Then he took up a cup, and after giving thanks, he said, take this and divide it amongst yourselves. For I tell you from now on, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. He took a loaf of the bread. We know that. What do you guys think about that? I know Skiba talks about possible Nazarite vow. What do you guys think about that? That he did not drink of the wine right there. So Jewish tradition has something similar. So it's called the Kiddush. Literally means sanctification. It's a blessing recited over wine or grape juice to sanctify the Shabbat and the holy days. Before reciting the Kiddush, the halal, which will be the next food item eaten in honor of the Sabbath or holiday, is first covered with a cloth. I've done a few of those early on in my walk, Kiddush. Where do they get it from? They get it from, Melchizedek. Okay, number 20, it says, and blessed be the Most High God, which have delivered thine enemies into thy hand. He gave them tithes of all. So, pictures for you. These are the different tithes. I'm not going to read the Jewish words, but all kosher cattle were tithe, and 1/10 of the animals were brought to Jerusalem, offered as a sacrifice. The second one, 1/10 of the farmer's produce was given to the Levite. They didn't have any portions of their own, and it was a tithe. The land itself was tithe. We know about that, Shemitah or 7-year sabbatical. And finally, I I don't know if this, I guess it was, I don't know. No, this is just tradition. But today, most tithing is done in terms of money. Traditional term for the tithe on money, income, and is distinguished from agricultural and cattle tithes. So every Jew is obligated to get a tenth of his earnings to charity. Okay, finally, so I'm ending it here soon. A few left. This was cool. I have a chiastic structure coming up. I know Katie likes that, but then I have a comparison of two valleys. So last episode, we read the beginning of this chapter, which talked about the valley of Siddim, and then at the end, there was the valley of Shavah. And so I want to go with the difference between those. And so, as we read, Abraham returned from his victory and went to the valley of Shavah, the king's valley, where Melchizedek brought out bread and wine and blessed him. So notice that this makes for two valleys in the same chapter. And as I said, I talked about the valley of Siddim, where the great battle took place. Now we're in the valley of Shavah, where great blessings take place. So, as you can see, a place for battle and death, a place for blessing. King of Sodom goes out to meet Mesopotamia. King of Sodom goes out to meet Abraham. Black slime or tar, red wine. People physically sink down into the earth. Abraham is lifted and elevated spiritually. 9 kings are mentioned representing much of the world. A 10th king is mentioned, Melchizedek. King of Sodom loses everything. King of Sodom regains everything. The valley of great noise, swords, clashing, war drums sounding. Quiet valley, words are spoken. External and internal battles. I thought that was cool. All in the same chapter, 2 valleys. Here's the chiastic structure one on this chapter. So let's see. So, as I said earlier, there was war earlier on. Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him. Kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. They took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals, and they went their way. And they took Lot. Remember that one? Abraham's brother's son. And there came one that escaped, told Abraham. We were saying it's Og, maybe, in the Targum. Central axis. Now he dwelt by the terebinths of the Mamre. Mamre, the brother of Eshcol, and the brother of Anar, and these were the confederate with Abraham. And so now we're going back on the chiastic structure, and Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive. So Abraham pursued, and he brought back all the goods, and brought back his brother Lot and his goods, and the women also. And he returned the slaughter of Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him to the valley of Shavah. So you see it everywhere in Genesis. It's amazing. It's definitely it's divinely. I mean, I don't know. I'm not explaining it. Two more quick things. This is Abraham's route that he took when he rescued Lot. So if you just want to get that. And finally, and then we'll be done with 14, the Hebrew word malak, or king, appears 28 times in this chapter, emphasizing the significance of Abraham's victory. That's what I got for 14. Hope you enjoyed it. Did I read 15, Noel?
I'll go ahead and read 15, and then I'll give you first commentary and on that chapter. And that was really great stuff. And obviously didn't know what you're going to pull out of Melchizedek, but that was all really good. So here we are continuing on. This is chapter 15 of the Genesis Targum. After these words, when the kings had gathered together and had fallen before Abram, and 4 kings had been slain, and 9 hosts brought back, Abram reasoned in his heart and said, "Woe to me, because I have received the reward of my appointments in this world, and have no portion in the world to come. Or peradventure, the brethren and friends of those who have been slain will combine in legions and come against me. Or at that time there was found with me the reward of a little righteousness, so that they fell before me. But the second time reward may not be found with me." And he's doing a lot of reasoning here. "And by me the name of the heavens may be profaned." Thereupon was the word, or they state here specifically, Pithgama, of Yahuwah with Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, for if these men should gather together in legions and come against thee, my word, Memra," so they're separating the 2 words, different words in Aramaic, "will be thy shield. And also if these fall before thee in this world, the reward of thy work shall be kept and be prepared before me in the world to come, great exceedingly." And Abram said, "Yahuwah Elohim, great blessings hast thou given me, and great are they which it is before thee to give me. Nevertheless, What profit is to me when I pass from the world without children? And Eliezer the manager, or Bar Pharnasath the son of sustenance of my house, by whose hands signs were wrought for or to me in Darmasek, expects to be my heir. And Abram said, Behold, to me thou hast not given a son, and behold, the manager of my house will be my heir. And behold, a word from before Yahuwah was to him, saying, He shall not be thine heir, but a son whom thou wilt beget shall be thy heir. And he brought him forth without and said, Look up now to the heavens and number the stars, and if thou art able to number them. And he said, So will be thy sons. And he believed in Yahuwah and had faith in the Mamre, or the word of Yahuwah. He reckoned it to him for righteousness, because he parleyed not before him with words. And he said to him, I am Yahuwah who brought thee out of the fiery furnace of the Kasdai to give thee this land to inherit. And he said, Yahuwah Elohim, by what may I know that I shall be the heir of it? And he said, Bring me oblations and offer before me a heifer of 3 years, and a goat of 3 years, a ram of 3 years, and a dove, and the young of a pigeon. And he brought all these before him and divided them in the midst, and set in order every division over against its fellow. But the fowl he divided not. And there came down idolatrous peoples, which are like to unclean birds, to steal away the sacrifices of Israel. But the righteousness of Abram was a shield over them. And when the sun was nearing to set, a deep sleep was thrown upon Abram, and behold, 4 kingdoms arose to enslave his children: terror, which is Babel; darkness, which is Madai; greatness, which is Javan; decline, which is Pharez, which is to fall; and to have no uplifting, and from whence it is to be that the children of Israel will come up. And he said to Abram, Knowing thou must know that thy sons shall dwell in a land not their own, because thou hast not believed, and they will subjugate and afflict them 400 years. And also that people whom they shall serve I will judge with 250 plagues, and afterwards they shall go forth into liberty with great riches. And thou shalt be gathered to thy fathers, thy soul shall rest in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a good old age. And in the 4th generation of thy sons they will return hither to inherit, because the guilt of the Amorrhae is not yet complete. And when the sun had set, there was darkness, and behold, Abram saw Gehenna ascending, smoke with flaming coals and burning flakes of fire, wherewith the wicked are to be judged. And behold, he passed between those divisions. In that day Yahuwah ordained a covenant with Abram, that he would not judge therein his sons, but would deliver them from the kingdom, saying, To thy sons will I give this land from Nilos, or the Nile of Mizraim, unto the great river, the river Pherath, the Shalmia, and the Kenizah, and the Cadmonea, and the Hittite, and the Phaserai, and the Giberai, and the Emorei, and the Canaanite, and the Girgashay, and the Jebusay. Over to you, Michael.
What a way to end that one. That was funny. All right, so I'm going to start on obviously number 1. So I thought I struggled on chapter 15 to find some good nuggets. I'll let you guys be the judge of that. But my wife thought it was pretty good, but she's biased. Number 1 says, after, in KJV, after these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. So the word study is on that word reward, and it's I think it's kind of cool. So it's Jacob. So Genesis 31, here it is. Basically, Jacob sent out and called Rachel and Leah to his flock and said, I see your father's attitude that is not friendly toward me. But the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. However, do not allow him to hurt me. If he spoke thus, the speckled shall be your wages, or your reward. And all the flock brought forth speckled, and if he spoke thus, the striped shall be your wages, or your reward. Then all the flock brought forth striped. So, for those who aren't familiar with the story, I thought this was a decent summary. I kind of want to link it back to number 1. So it was a deal. So all the sheep would belong to Laban, and Jacob's wage would be the offspring of the sheep. However, Laban made it more complicated when he clarified that only the spotted, speckled, and striped lambs would be Jacob's. And so Laban pulls a switch by taking all the SSS sheep and moving them a 3 days journey away from his flock. He is left with only solid colored sheep. But remember, he can only keep the SSS lambs. Laban was sure that only the solid colored sheep would produce solid colored lambs. So Jacob had a plan. He peeled the bark from sticks of wood to make them look striped. He then had the rams and ewes mate in front of those striped sticks, and lo and behold, solid colored sheep produce lambs. And so I want to elaborate on the reward. So is this possible? Like, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and my exceeding great reward." Like, just look at the faith Jacob had, that Abram had. Fear not, I will give you this great reward. Trust him. Whenever, when you're given no striped lambs, Yah can make a way. So I thought that was a cool little word study there that kind of led to that. Palestinian, of course, way different. If you guys are following along, I'll post it here because look at that. That's the way different. So you have one sentence in the KJV, and then you have this. So after these words, when the kings had gathered together and had fallen before Abram, and 4 kings had been slain, and 9 hosts brought back Abram, Abram reasoned in his heart and said, "Woe to me, because I have received the reward of my appointments in this world, and have no portion in the world to come. Peradventure the brethren and friends of those who have been slain will combine in legions and come against me. Or that at that time there was found with me the reward of little righteousness, so that they fell before me. But the second time reward may not be found with me. And by me the name of the heavens may be profaned." Thereupon the word of the Lord with Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, but these men shall gather together in legions." Interesting, legions too. That's what the demons were in the New Testament. "Come against thee, my word, or Memra, will be thy shield, and also these fall before thee." So obviously I have to talk about that word Memra. So Memra is an Aramaic term which means word, decree, or speech. Sometimes the Hebrew word pronounced deber is used instead of Memra, which also means word. Some extra canonical books that talk about the word of the Lord. 4th Ezra, 2nd Ezra 6 says, "And I said, O Yahweh, you spoke at the beginning of creation and said on the first day, let heaven and earth be made, and your word accomplish the work." And Wisdom of Solomon 16 says, "No medicine or ointment cured them. They were restored to health by your word, O Lord, the word which heals all humanity." Just trying to give more examples of what the word is and the power that it has. Number 2, it says, I guess I don't have to read that because I'm not doing word study. Okay, Palestinian says, "And Abram said, Lord God, great blessings hast thou given me, and great are they which it is. Before thee give to me, nevertheless, what profit is to me? And I pass from this world without children, and Eleazar, the manager of my house, by whose hands were wrought to me in Damascus, expects to be my heir. Abram said, Behold to me, thou hast not given a son, and behold, the manager of my house will be my heir." So I found this commentary that said, in the ancient Near East, there was a well-attested practice to ensure an heir, even if no son were born to the man. So the childless couple would adopt one of the servants born into the household. This son would care for them in their old age and would inherit their possessions and property at the time of their death. At this low point in Abram's faith, it was the best for which he could hope for. So Yah promised Abram far more than which he could provide for himself. Eleazar was not the heir that he had promised. His descendants were come from his own reproductive cells. He would have a son of his own. So some verses on having children. So obviously there's Genesis verse. 1 Samuel also characterizes childlessness as a misfortune. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, Psalms 127 make clear that having a child is a blessing from God. And then Leviticus 20 and Deuteronomy 28 threaten childlessness as a punishment. Okay, this will be my last thing I'll hand off to Noel. Number 4, word study. It says, this was a good one too. "And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir. He that shall come forth out of thy own bowels shall be thine heir." So out of thy own bowels, the word I'm looking at. In 2 Samuel 7:10 through 13. This was amazing. This was Messiah. So, "I will establish a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, so that they may live in their own place, not to be disturbed again, nor will malicious people oppress them any more as previously, even from the day that I appointed judges over my people Israel. I will give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord also declares to you that the Lord will make a house for you. When your days are finished, you lie down with your fathers. I will raise up your descendant after you, who will come from you or out of thy own bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I just thought that was amazing. The same word was used in both. Talking about Abraham, his son, then Yahuwah basically saying, his son, and will establish a kingdom, and his throne will be forever. What a prophecy of Yeshua coming from this one word study. Still have a lot left, but I'll hand off to Noel.
All right, I think you just covered verse 1, right? So I'll do the same. And
No, 1 through 4. Sorry.
oh, you did 1 through 4. Okay, well, I'll cover 1 through 4 then. So the first verse was quite wordy. Abram obviously had a lot of concerns, and it sounds a lot like my own thought process. If you ever climbed into my head, like he's thinking through all these different scenarios. And we read in Romans about Abraham's faith, and that righteousness specifically was imputed due to his faith. And I was covering that in the first 6 chapters of my Roman study when we went through that. Well, one thing that I really found fascinating here, and this is all based on his faith, is that we see Abram concerned about his receiving his portion in the world to come now rather than later and profaning heaven. And I thought that was a really fascinating insight into a man of faith. And it's like I was going through the Roman study that what modern Christianity, evangelicalism, whatever you want to call it, denominationalism, whatever, Pollyanity, the way they put it now is that faith is like you're given righteousness and you're good to go. And Abram clearly didn't feel that way. I mean, he's like, I have faith that Yahuwah is going to come through on his end of the bargain, but I still have my end to uphold in the sense that I am a representative of him and I want to represent his kingdom to come. And I don't want to, I want rewards. And what I just read in Genesis 15:1 reminds me of another of Paul's letters in Philippians 2:12. And I actually really love this verse. It says, "Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence." Isn't that interesting? Paul's writing these people and saying, I know you were obedient to the Father, to the Torah, obviously, while I was in your presence, because Paul was Torah observant. He says, but even when I'm gone, that's great that you do that then too. It's almost like sometimes when I talk to people, I get the sense that they say certain words around me because they think that I will approve of it. And I kind of get the sense that they don't actually live it out in their own lives. They're kind of just doing it because they're kind of in my presence. But Paul's like, even outside my presence, you're doing this. And this is the kicker right here. What I love. He says, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. In our present culture, where Christianity teaches entitlement, that you are entitled to your salvation. They may not use that word, but you go in and talk to people, that's pretty much the attitude they have. This exemplifies what we're seeing with Abram here very, very good, I think. That he was working out his salvation with fear and trembling. Now, Michael already went over the difference between Pithgama and Memra. And, in the Aramaic, they would have literally been two different words. For some reason, the translator made them both word. And I feel like it wasn't well done because Pithgama, it means edict, decree, or a sentence by a judge. So why didn't it just translate to say Yahuwah, that he, in his edict, in his decree? That would have made a lot more sense to me. The word, whatever, it is what it is. But then we see memra, which means speech, right? It is literally the word of Yahuwah. And what we see here is that, let me pull this up again. Please don't disappear on me now. It says, my word, memra, will be thy shield. And I love that because it's literally saying that, well, It's not literally saying it's pretty close to saying that my Yahuwah is saying my word will be your salvation. In fact, we do see that in other parts of the Targum where the word of Yahuwah is Yeshua, right? So here are some passages that I was looking up that refers to the shield. Now keep in mind that it is Yahusha who is our shield. So this is what it says in Psalm 18, verse 30. This Elohim, his way is perfect. The word of Yahuwah proves true. He who, the word of Yahuwah, is a shield for all those who take refuge in him. And that's exactly what Yahusha said when he was over there in I think he was what was it? No, he wasn't looking over Jerusalem when he said it, but he said that he said he wishes that he could be like the mother hen that would gather all the chicks under his wing, right? Like that's what he wanted, and he would protect them if they would, but they didn't want that, right? They didn't want to have him be his protector. And then we see in Psalm 5:12, for you bless the righteous, O Yahuwah. You cover him with favor as with a shield. And of course, we see that Abram or Abraham was imputed with righteousness based on his faith, and he was protected by the word as a shield. Uh, but here's another one from Philippians 4:7. I already quoted from this epistle tonight, but it says, and the shalom of Elohim, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Yahusha HaMashiach. And same thing as guarding like a shield. But here we see in Psalm 28:7, Yahuwah is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts, and I am helped. My heart exults, and with my song I give thanks to him. Psalm 18:2, Yahuwah is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my Elohim, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my Yeshua, my stronghold. Psalm 91:4, he will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge, which is exactly what Yahusha was quoting. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. So again, Yahusha was saying that he wanted to play that role of the shield, but the Yahudim didn't want it. They did not want him to be their protector. And obviously, the word savior means so much more than it's almost like when I hear evangelicalism talking about it, it's almost like one dimensional. Like he saved me from my sins. I'm like, what does that mean? And it always means that they can be lawless. It almost always comes down to that. Like their idea of a savior is, I mean, there's so much more to what a savior is than the false notion that you can just go and sin afterwards. Second Thessalonians 3:3. But Yahuwah is faithful. He will establish you and guard you against the evil one. Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your Elohim. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And that could be a whole study right there on who the right hand of of Yahuwah Elohim is. And I think probably most people here would agree that it's the right hand is who sits at his right hand is Yahusha. 2 Timothy 4:18. What does this one say? Yahuwah will rescue me from every evil deed and bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom. Yeah, I hadn't read that one in advance. That's not a great one. And then here we see Psalm 32:7. I don't even know why I included that one. You are a hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with shouts of deliverance. Selah. All right. So the last two were not, I put them at the bottom of the list for a reason. But all right, let's see what else we got here. All right, verse 2. And okay, so I found this really interesting that Abram is always, it's really interesting to see his relationship with the father. And we're going to see this later with Sodom and Gomorrah, where he he kind of speaks his mind and he goes in boldness and says, and Moshe was in his humility was very similar as well. You see these great men of Elohim, and they just go and they speak very boldly to him, and he's like, so the manager of my house, he's Eliezer, he's gonna be the heir, and that's a frightening thought to think about. That uh, he was, according to the Targum, he was either the son or the grandson of Nimrod. All right, and Nimrod, of course, was a lineage of Ham. And of course, my perspective on this and my point of view is that he was the seed of the serpent initially. I mean, Ham came through the seed of the serpent. Well, in our last study earlier tonight, when I was going over the book of gleanings and the book of creation, which were Egyptian texts, it and I didn't feel comfortable enough of bringing that into this study, but it's really interesting that at the same time it describes what I believe is the Genesis 13 war, this massive war that we were talking about the last couple of weeks. That basically went all the way down in Saudi Arabia, probably into Egypt, all the way up to Lebanon, Damascus, all the way up to Babylon. And what's fascinating is that it says that the people that came from Nimrod's side, that they were the people leading it, they were the seed of the serpent. And I read that, I almost fell out of my chair. Um, so my point here is, and I could do, we'll get to genealogy later on with other people that come into Abraham's life, but he seemed to be surrounded by people that were accredited being the seed of the serpents. And it's almost a miracle. Well, it is a miracle. It is a straight out miracle that the seed of Shem, the seed of all the way going back through Noah to Seth, through Adam, was perfectly preserved all the way down to Yehuda. Because particularly with Abraham, you see so many instances where he was ready to hand the keys of the kingdom, the inheritance, over to the wrong seed, and that's just incredible to think about. All right. And remember now, he's got, according to the writings of Abraham, he's got something like 50 daughters or some insane number. I mean, he has other wives. He's got tons of daughters. It just, I imagine like the little lady with the shoe, and like children are falling out the windows and stuff. I just imagine like daughters running amok all around Abram. And like just imagine like the old Jewish man just surrounded by young girls. And um and so he's still trying to work out his the mystery. And this is what we read in Romans 4:18. This probably, I think I did this a couple months ago in the Romans study, but Paul is talking about Abraham and he says, "Who against hope believed in hope." Let me say that again. Who against hope believed in hope, that he might become the father of many nations according to that which was spoken. And so what what we're essentially seeing here is that um, Abraham had, or I guess I should say Abram at this point, he had no idea how this was going to work out. Like he's like, apparently I'm shooting, if it comes down to boys, I'm shooting blanks. I'm only getting girls out of this, and I've got no heir. I've got tons of really great guys around me who could be the heir. I'm going to hand it over to them. But it just, again, it shows, um, what's the word I'm looking for? It shows that he trusted in Elohim to come through on his end of the bargain, which is exactly the kind of the context of this entire chapter. And that's the saving faith um, that Paul talks about. That all of us sitting here, like, we don't know how this is all going to work out. We don't know how our own lives are going to work out. We don't know how New Jerusalem's coming down. We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know how all this is coming to a conclusion. It seems really dark right now. We're surrounded by darkness, but we believe, um, against hope, believe in hope that Yahusha, our high priest, is going to come through on his end. And again, that's what we see exemplified here. Handing it back to you, Michael.
That was great stuff. We messaged you in the chat to reference that book that you found, The Seed of Satan, or the serpent, and then what you're saying about Christians and the entitlements. Wow, very sad. So number 5 for me is my longest, so we'll start there. So KJV says, "And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven and tell the stars if thou be able to number them. And he said unto them, So shall thy seed be." So that word "toward heaven," I found 2 cross references based on that word that were pretty cool. So Deuteronomy 4 takes the claim of, "And beware not to lift up your eyes towards heaven," or to heaven, "and see the sun and moon and stars, all the hosts of heaven, and be drawn away and worship them and serve them." So Yah tells Abraham to look up towards heaven. But Deuteronomy warned you not to not to follow them or be drawn away and worship them. And we'll get to more of that in a bit. But Judges 13:19. So Manoah took the young goat along with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord. And he performed wonders while Manoah and his wife looked on. For it came about when the flame went up from the altar toward heaven, same word, that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. When Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. Again, just showing that just because you look towards the stars doesn't mean it's bad, right? It's your actions towards that. He created everything, right? Don't be drawn away for them. Look what happened with Manoah. The angel of the Lord ascended in the flame. The flame went up from the altar toward heaven. And it also mentioned the rock. Yeshua is also our rock as well. Okay, so every book we read, at least one chapter I try to link it to the Maseroth. This was no different. So because we have a Maseroth room that's pretty dusty. The Maseroth is a biblical Hebrew word found in the book of Job 38:32, and literally meaning constellations, while others interpret the word as garland of crowns. But in its context, it's that of astronomical constellations, and is often interpreted as a term for zodiac. So check this out. So this is just that verse, Job 38:32. Look at that. So the English Standard. Can you lead forth the Maseroth in their season, or can you guide the bear with its children? Berean, pretty similar, but it says cubs. Now look at that, King James. Canst thou bring forth the Maseroth in its season, or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? I will get more on Arcturus in a bit. And then the New American just goes total left field. Can you bring out a constellation in its seasons and guide the bear with her satellites? What are we doing here? What are we doing here with her satellites? Okay. But then look at this. Wycliffe version. So I brought up Wycliffe in the wisdom study because it mentioned 12 fruits of the Spirit. It was the only one. Look what Wycliffe did with this one. Whether thou bringest forth Lucifer, that is the day star, in his time, and makest the even star to rise upon the sons of the earth, bringest thou forth Mazaloth in its time, that is the stars and its constellations, or makest Arcturus rise upon the sons of the earth. There's another Lucifer passage. What do you guys make about that? I have to do more research on the Wycliffe Bible, but that's number 2 of very interesting things I found from the Wycliffe version. Okay, so Arcturus. Her satellites, exactly. So it's in this, obviously Wikipedia don't, but I thought that was interesting. Look at the distance from the Earth. So it's the brightest star in the northern constellation of Boots. And then it goes like this. Of course, 36.666 light years away. Got to get that 666 in there. Arcturus. Okay, so remember the Deuteronomy passage earlier regarding worshiping these things. The occult definitely do that, right? But I showed earlier that Yah told Abraham to look toward heaven. Judges verse was a good verse towards heaven, but there's also the negative verse. And you can worship these things, and the occult definitely do that. And definitely throw in their 666. So there's another verse that talks about the Maseroth too in 2 Kings, and I just want to show you guys that. And it's about worshiping, so it goes with the negative. So Aramaic, who are setting incense for Baal and for the sun and for the moon and the stars. Breton Septuagint says, and they burned incense to Baal and to the sun and to the moon and to the Maseroth. Again, you can burn it, you can sacrifice, you can worship these gods up there. Enoch has an interesting take on those stars. The 12 signs. So, there's obviously 2 different things. You can worship them, or good things can come out of it. Okay, so I don't know how I got onto this, but not exactly Maseroth. So the term Mazel Tov, we all know what that is. Jewish phrase used to express congratulations for a happy or significant occasion or event. That word Mazel comes from the biblical Hebrew Mazal, meaning constellation, astrological sign. Why? Why are they saying that? A lot of people say that religion, they believe that's the moon. I don't know. I know maybe Islam is, but that's where they get it from. It's from the same root word, from Maseroth, is Mazel Tov. I thought that was interesting. Yasher. So with regards to the Mazzaroth talk, you know, I forgot his name, but he was talking in the chats today about, you know, some negative on Yasher. You know, I'm not 100% sure yet, but Yasher 8. I will put it here. I won't read it all, but I'm not going to read all of it, but I'll give you the context. And so I'll start on number 2. And when all the wise men, sound familiar? This is about Abraham's birth. And conjurers went out from the house of Terah. They lifted up their eyes towards heaven that night to look at the stars. And they saw, and behold, one very large star coming from the east and ran into the heavens. And he swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heaven. And they were astonished. And the sages understood this matter. And then it continues. Oh, wait, actually, I should read that one. Oh, so this only betokens that the child has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth. He and his children forever. He and his seed will slay great kings and inherit the earth. That was their interpretation. So does that sound familiar? Similar to Yeshua. Star of Bethlehem appears in the nativity story in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, where wise men from the east, or magi, are inspired by the star to travel to Jerusalem. And of course, we know about Herod and killing the babies, and you know, they did the same thing to Abraham. So I didn't post it, but the rest of Jasher 8 tells the story of Nimrod demanding Terah to bring newborn Abraham to kill him, just like Herod with Yeshua. Terah brings a servant's child instead, and Nimrod kills him by dashing his head. Then Terah takes Abram, his wife, and his nurse and hides them in a cave until Abram is 10 years old. Then Abram went to live with Noah for 39 years, leaving when he was 50. Again, Yasher, but interesting story. Like Yasher, some might say it's rabbinic. It's saying the same thing, kind of like Yeshua's story. I thought that was cool. So also in this verse, in Genesis 15:5, God promised Abraham's descendants would be as numerous as the stars of heaven. I'm not going to read all this, but I'm going to post it. These are just other examples of being promised as numerous as the stars of heaven. So Abraham's descendants, Isaac, God reminded Isaac that he had promised Abraham. Jacob reminded God that he had promised Jacob's descendants. Moses reported that God had multiplied the Israelites until they are as numerous as the stars, and so on and so on. Just some examples, again, of God's promise to this bloodline. I'm going to do number 6 and then hand off to Noah real quick. And he believed in the Lord and counted to him for righteousness. And Noel hit on that with all the good Paul stuff. Palestinian says, and he believed in the Lord and had faith in the memra, or word of the Lord. And he reckoned to it, little country accent there, to him for righteousness, because he parlayed not before him with words. So one of my favorite words in the Hebrew expert, but emunah. So the Hebrew word emunah, often rendered as faith in many English translations, comes from the root word amen, which means to rest securely or rely upon, where we get also the word amen. A root occurs for the first time in Torah in connection with Abraham, and he believed in the Lord, and he regarded to him as righteousness. Yeah, still have a decent amount left, but I'll hand it back off to Noel.
Yeah, so the Genesis 15:6 there in the Aramaic Targum, it actually adds the word of Yahuwah there, which I love. So this is what it says in the Masoretic 15:6. And he believed in Yahuwah, and he counted it to him for righteousness. The LXX says pretty much the same thing. And Abram believed in Elohim, and it was reckoned to him for righteousness. But then the Aramaic Targum says, and he believed in Yahuwah and had faith in the word of Yahuwah. And what we saw the interchange there of the two words in verse, and it was a bit of a giveaway, because it's time and again in the Targum there's this idea that the word, it's different than just him giving Yahuwah giving his promise or his decree. That's not what the word means here. You can't argue that. It's it's basically the word itself that is going to go through to the end, right, and uphold his end of the bargain. And it's so instrumental in this very chapter when we see the covenant being cut. That Yahuwah personally cuts the covenant, and so basically, they all three agree. Genesis 15:6 of the Masoretic, the LXX, and the Aramaic Targum, that belief is a virtue. But even more so, it is an imputing of righteousness, at least in Elohim's eyes. And difficult to really argue against that fact. And we saw in our Roman study that righteousness is conforming to the standard. And so that's something that, again, it's really twisted and contorted in Christianity. Their idea is that conforming to the standard is that the Father, we can kind of act however we want. Now, not all denominations will say that, but this seems to be the general understanding that you see out there in Christianity today. Just it's pretty grim. That it's really, it all comes down to everything they say that Jesus did. That that we basically can kind of live our lives how we want, and that doesn't really matter because Jesus did it all. But no, it's conform being declared righteous is conforming to a standard. It's being, and obviously Yahushua, our high priest, he has done the sacrifice for us. But oh man, I'm talking to myself. But Abraham, again, against hope, believed in hope, right? And it was. I'm really struggling here right now, but we see him again, really trying to work out how he can act in this world that would represent the world to come. All right, they go hand in hand. We see that in his thought process. All right, now this is what we read in Deuteronomy chapter 33. This ends the Torah portions, and we just read this morning. I really like this. It said this. This ties in really well with Genesis 15:6 of the Targum. Happy are you, O Yasharel, who of all the nations are like you, a people saved in the name of the word of Yahuwah. And then again, it says, He is the shield of your help, which we already saw, right? Our salvation, Yeshua, is our shield, and his sword, the strength of your excellency. And your enemies shall be found liars against you from terror, and you shall tread upon the necks of their kings. This is, of course, they're getting ready to enter into the land. And so it's literally saying that Yahusha, the Messiah, the word, is going before them. He's going to be their salvation. He's going to be their shield. He will be the one that tread down the enemy for them. Right now, what I really wanted to cover tonight, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of where Michael's going to be at, um, is Genesis 15 and 11. And he probably wants to cover this, but I think I'll be covering material that I don't think I'll be cutting him down too much here, or treading on his material. But this is so instrumental to understanding Acts chapter 10 and Peter's vision. I don't know if anybody caught this while we were reading this. And it says this. Um, let's see. And there came down idolatrous peoples. Let's see. Do I have this in the Masoretic? Oh, man, I wish I had this in the Masoretic. Okay. Anyways, this is what it says. And there came down idolatrous peoples, which are like to unclean birds, to steal away the sacrifice of Yasharel. But the righteousness of Abram was a shield over them. Okay, and this is what it says in the Masoretic. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. So the Masoretic is saying that there were actual birds that came down to devour the carcass, and you can imagine the scene. Abraham is running to drive them away. Well, the Targum is saying no, they weren't birds. They were idolatrous peoples coming down to try to interrupt the sacrifice, to try to interrupt the covenants, and they were like unclean birds, and Abraham drove them away. I think this is so instrumental to understanding Hebrew thinking at this time period when the Targum was put out, as well as in Yahusha's own time period. I will remind you again of Peter or Kepha's vision of the animals in Acts chapter 10. I'm not going to read that. I gave a presentation on it 2 or 3 months ago where what happens is that people read this and they go, all right, gorilla is on the table, puppy is on the table, anything I want to eat, anything that I desire is on the table, because Peter had this vision of these animals coming down these sheets, and he kept saying, no, not me, Lord, I'll never eat those animals. Well, if you read it carefully, Peter actually he interprets the vision for us. Nobody likes that part, but he understands that the animals are representation of people. They're not actual animals. All right. So again, you're seeing that same sort of um, thought process with Genesis 15:11. Well, there was when we were having that discussion, there was another great thank you, Desmond. I'm not sure if he's still in the room tonight. Yeah, Desmond's here tonight. And I had made a comment about how the Epistle of Barnabas was a lawless text that Barnabas, this Barnabas fellow, this person identifying as Barnabas, was doing away with the Torah and just ridiculing it and saying how we didn't have to do it anymore. And this is often used as evidence by church historians to say the Torah was done away with very early on and that we are not to keep it. Well, he had brought up that there was a manuscript that was put forward, a Targum, an interpretation by an individual who showed that not to be the case, and he was showing that the sin is in the translators and the interpreters who are actually there's a conspiracy really that they're trying to make the early Christians out to be lawless people, and they're purposely translating this wrong. And it's amazing that a little word here or there, uh, either inserted or taken out of a text, can quickly change the context and the meaning. And I was saying that the Epistle of Barnabas, it's comedy. It's actually embarrassing that Barnabas, this Barnabas fellow, would be making a case against the Torah in the way he did by saying that basically it's this. All right, he's saying. Follow this because I'm about to read from the corrected version. He was saying, Moses never really meant that you weren't supposed to eat pig. What he really meant was that you're not supposed to be around piggish people. He doesn't really mean that you're not to eat octopus. You're just not to be around people that act like an octopus. And you're like, wait, what? What are you talking about? That's the lamest explanation because like clearly all throughout the Bible, I mean, it's so clear that you are not to eat pig, that you're not to eat shellfish. I mean, it's hard to mistake that. So if Barnabas is really making that argument, it's laughable. It would be laughable that anyone would believe that, but this is what modern translators, um, like like Lightfoot and some of the others, are putting out there, saying he was claiming. Well, this is the translation that was done recently on the Epistle of Barnabas, and it changes everything. So I'm going to read from chapter 10, and this is the famous chapter in Barnabas where he's talking about the animals. Now, keep in again, this is in context to the Aramaic Targum that they were identifying people as animals, as idolatrous people are like unclean birds, right? Now, clearly, the writers of the Targum are not saying you can eat unclean birds, but they are also saying that, yes, there are people that are like unclean birds out there. So, this is what Barnabas says. When Moshe said, you will not eat the swine, the eagle, the hawk, the crow, or any fish that has no scales, he had three principles in mind. For at the end, he enumerates them in Devarim, and that'd be Deuteronomy. I will place before this people my Torah. So this is not Elohim's commandment about crunching. Rather, Moshe spoke in the Ruach about swine. You will not cleave to piggish people of this sort. When they got full, they forgot the master, and when they are in need, they think of the master. A piggish people. So a piggish people, when they get full, they forget the master, and when they are in need, they think of the master. That would be a piggish people. Like the swine who does not know its master when it eats, when hungry, it cries out, and once it has received, is quiet again. Nor will you eat the buzzard, the hawk, the kite, or the crow. He means that you will not cleave to nor be like people of this sort, who do not know how to provide for themselves by labor and sweat. But in their iniquity they seize the property of others. They observe, watching whom they will plunder in their covetousness, while they carry on as though innocent. The same way these birds provide no food for themselves by work, but sitting idly by, seek out how they can eat the meats of others. Some people are likewise destructive on account of their evil works. And you will not eat the lamprey or octopus or the squid. And he means you will not cleave to or become like people of this sort, who are immoral to the end, having already been condemned to death. Even as these accursed fish swim alone in the abyss, not suspended as the others, but dwelling in the muck and the depth of the sea. It's kind of interesting they knew that about octopus. I mean, who was capable of diving down to observe the octopus back then? I mean, think about that. Obviously, they probably had some tech to be able to do that. He says, "You will not eat the rabbit," and he means you will not be a pedophile. It actually says a pedophile. I guess rabbits are pedophiles. I don't know, but or like such. For the rabbit grows an orifice in the body each year, so it has as many. Um, um, I think it says anuses as years. Interesting. All right. Nor will you eat the hyena, meaning you will not be an effeminate seducer of children. Wow, this is pretty dark. I didn't realize that. So, yeah, so don't be like the hyena, meaning you will not be an effeminate, like I guess, like almost like like a effeminate man, kind of homosexual seducer of children, which we see in libraries across America right now, or a wanton, abortive fornicator, abortive fornicator, or any such person, because the hyena's traits change each year, becoming like a male one year and like a female the next. Nor will you eat the weasel, and with good reason. You will not be like those who hear about, who do forbidden and immoral acts in their mouths, for these creatures gush forth into their mouths. So Moshe spoke of these three teachings about food in a spiritual sense. All right. Now, pay attention to this. But the people, in accordance with the lust of their flesh, receive them as being only about eating. Now, what translators will do is they will take that out and they will say that Barnabas is claiming that the people misread Moshe to say they were about eating when it should have been just purely spiritual. No, and he's saying no, where they got it wrong was that they thought it was only about eating and not about the spiritual, that there's a spiritual sense that, they thought that, well, we're not going to eat a pig, but we can still be a piggish people. I mean, he's claiming here that, like, effeminate seducers of children, pedophiles, like, this language is so familiar to us. And there's these people he's pointing out, saying they think they're keeping the Torah by not eating these certain foods, but then they act like a pedophile. So, ouch. Tell us what you really think, Barnabas. So Moshe spoke of these three teachings about food in a spiritual sense, but the people, in accordance with the lust of their flesh, receive them as being only about eating. Even David receives knowledge of these same three teachings. He says, in like manner, blessed is the one who has not gone into the council chamber of the irreverence, even as fish make their way in darkness into the depths, and has not stood in the way of sinners, even as those who pretend to fear Yahuwah sin like swine. Um, that's kind of interesting. There's a lot of people who pretend to fear him, but they just openly sin or privately sin. And has not sat in the seat of the destructive, even as do the perching birds looking out for booty. But in the end, you do indeed have a complete commandment covering food. For Moshe said, eat everything that is cloven footed and choose the cud. What does he mean? The cruncher takes food from the muncher, and becoming dependent upon him for food, acts as though he were glad. See how well Moshe discerns the commandment? He means cleave to those who fear Yahuwah, who walk in his commandments, who have received them into their hearts. Cleave to those who discuss Yahuwah's commandments and observe them. So this is what we should be doing, guys. We ourselves should be cleaving to those who walk his commandments and who spend their time discussing them. And I know that's hard to do. I mean, I know that in our lives we are constantly looking for. It is so hard to find anybody who even wants to talk about the Bible. I can't find Christians in my neighborhood or anywhere around here who even wants to talk about the Bible. You start talking about it, and they're just like, "That's weird. This isn't church. Why do you want to talk about that?" I have a guy down the road who's a pastor who you can't get the guy to talk about the Bible. Cleave to those who know that practicing them is a work of gladness. Cleave to them who meditate on the word of Yahuwah. And again, what is the meaning of with cloven hoof? It means that the one who cleaves to righteousness walks in this world, yet cleaves to the expectation of the set apart age to follow. Consider how well Moshe has made this Torah. How is it possible for anyone to recognize or understand these things? No matter. We speak them just as Yahuwah willed, because we have correctly understood his commandments. For this cause, he circumcised our ears and our hearts so we might appreciate them all. So what he's saying is that Barnabas is not doing away with circumcision. He's not doing away with clean and unclean eating. He's saying that if we have a circumcised heart, if Yahuwah has truly circumcised us, then we will understand that there is a spiritual significance well beyond the physical act, that we are to, actually think about the Torah. We're to walk out the Torah, and we're to surround ourselves with people who do the same and not unclean people. All right. So that's just a really interesting observation there that I read in Genesis. Back to you, Michael.
I'm back. Sorry. Okay, so where am I? I was getting ahead, reading ahead. I'm on number 8. So KGV says, and he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? So commentary was talking about this as Abraham was not complaining, but he asked God, through what merit would he inherit the land? And as we will read on, God replied that Abraham and his descendants would merit the land through the atoning sacrifices that Yah would institute for Abraham's descendants, as indicated by the next verse, in which God said, take me a heifer of 3 years old. And so number 9 says, and he said unto them, take me a heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Palestinian says, and he said, bring me oblations, and offer before me a heifer of 3 years, a goat of 3 years, a ram of 3 years, a dove, and a young of pigeon. So we're studying that word heifer. Thought it was interesting. So Jeremiah 46 says, make your baggage ready for exile, daughter living in Egypt. For Memphis will become a desolation. It will be destroyed and deprived of its inhabitants. Egypt is a pretty heifer. And then Hosea 10 says, number 11, Ephraim is a trained heifer that loves to thresh. But I will come over her fair neck with a yoke. I will harness Ephraim. Judah will plow. Jacob will harrow for himself. So with a view to righteousness. So I just thought it was interesting that he's taking a heifer in this kind of covenantal sacrifice, and then Egypt was a heifer. Ephraim was a heifer. So there was a midrash deduced that Yah showed Abraham 3 kinds of bullocks, 3 kinds of goats, 3 kinds of rams that Abram's descendants would need to sacrifice. What do you guys think about this? 3 kinds of bullock, and they give verses. The 3 kinds of bullocks were the bullocks in Leviticus 16, where the Israelites were sacrificed on the Day of Atonement. The bullock for unwitting transgression of the law, Leviticus 4, and then the heifer whose neck would require the Israelites to break in Deuteronomy. 3 kinds of goats that they would sacrifice on festivals during the new moon or Rosh Chodesh, and for an individual to bring Leviticus 4 for unknown sin again. 3 kinds of rams, guilt offering of certain obligations, guilt offering of doubt, and for a lamb to be brought by an individual. I think it's true, but that was interesting. And so also, there's similarities between this passage and then Leviticus 1. So they both had herd creatures and a heifer. They both had flock creatures, sheep, goats, and a female goat and ram. They both had turtle doves, pigeons, turtle doves, and young birds. I just thought it was interesting that this is Abraham's covenant, and he's still doing somewhat of a sacrifice, kind of like foreshadowing the Levitical, and then okay, number 10, it says, and he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against the other. But the birds divided he not. And so this was cool. Let's see. So in ancient Near East royal land grant treaties, I've talked about those, the grant treaties a few episodes ago. This type of ritual was done to seal the promises made. Through this blood covenant, Yah was conforming primarily 3 promises he made to Abraham. The promise of heirs of land and blessings. A blood covenant communicated a self-maledictory oath. The parties involved would walk the path between the slaughtered animals to say, may this be done to me if I do not keep my oath. And this wasn't the first time. There was another type of covenant like this in Jeremiah 34. This was not good. So Therefore, this is what the Lord says: You have not obeyed me in proclaiming release, each one to his brother and each to his neighbor. Behold, I am proclaiming a release to you, declares the Lord, to the sword, to the plague, and to the famine. I will make you a terror to all the kingdoms of the earth. I will give the people who have violated my covenant, who have not fulfilled the words of thy covenant, which they made before me, when they cut the calf in two and passed between its parts. So what do you guys make about that? So Yah wasn't involved. It's almost like they knew what happened with Abraham and they tried to force a covenant, and Yah wasn't a part of it. So I thought that was interesting in Jeremiah. Same kind of thing, but they did it in their own eyes because they weren't obedient. They violated the covenant. Some more on this covenant process. This was decent. The parties would take an animal, cut it in half down the middle, and split it in two. The two bloody halves would be separated and laid aside, after which each party would walk through the two halves. This ceremony represents each party giving up his rights to his own life, dying to self and beginning a new walk with one's new covenant partner unto death. Each half of the animal represents one of the covenanting parties, and by walking through the middle, each party was saying, God, do so to me if I ever break this covenant. Just split me right down the middle. Feed me to vultures. What do you guys make about that? I will do... This will be my last one, and I'll hand it to Noel, number 11. Actually, I'll do 11 and 12. So 11 says, and when the fowls came, this is what Noel was talking about with Peter's vision. I'm not going to go there, so that was good that he did that. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. And so Jerusalem Targum, I'm going with Jerusalem this time. It was a little bit different. And when the birds descended, they came not nigh the divisions. Those birds are unclean fowl, and those unclean fowl are the kingdoms of the earth, which are worshipper of idols, and which counsel evil counsels against the sons of Israel. But the integrity of the righteous Abram hindered them. Okay, so what does Jubilees have to say about this? What's that? Linen talk in there. I love that. So, and the seed time came for the sowing of the seed upon the land. And they all went forth together to protect their seed against the ravens. And Abram went forth with those that went, and the child was a lad 14 years. A cloud of ravens came to devour the seed, and Abram ran to meet them before they settled on the ground, and cried to them before they settled to devour the seed, and said, Descend not, return to the place whence ye came. And the ravens proceeded to turn back, and he caused the cloud of ravens to turn back that day 70 times. And all the ravens throughout all the land where Abram was there settled there so much as one. And all who were with him throughout all the land saw him cry out, and all the ravens turned back, and his name became great in the land of Chaldees. So KJV just says, and when the fowls came down the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Just real simple, one sentence. You get Jubilees, you get this amazing story about what Abram did. Good job. Last thing, and I'll hand it off to Noel. KJV says on number 12, and when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. Jerusalem Targum. So I'm doing the Jerusalem again. It was a little bit different. And when the sun was going to set, sleep profound and sweet fell upon Abram. And behold, Abram saw 4 kingdoms, which should arise to bring his sons into subjection and terror. The greatness of darkness fell upon him. Terror, that is Babel. Darkness, that is Media. Interesting word. Greatness, that is Greece. Fell, that is Edom, Rome. That 4th kingdom, which is to fall and never to rise again forever and ever. I don't even know what to make about that. Jerusalem Targum. Some commentary taught that when prophets prophesied, their limbs trembled, their physical powers became weak, they lost control of their senses, and thus their minds became free to comprehend what they saw. Again, just commentary, just giving you more additional info. I don't have much left, but I'll hand off to Noel, and then I'll finish on my next time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that the 4th kingdom, which the Jerusalem says Edom, and we see that over and over again. And I've shown that the Aramaic Targum really stresses that Rome, interestingly enough, is Edom, and they're I see it as that they're kind of pulling back the curtain, and they're saying this is who's really running the show is Edom. And so they see it as kind of the kind of the climax, the end of history. That it's Greece, Babel, and these different empires. It's not really as much of a family struggle, but we see that Rome, if they are truly Edom, and I've done some genealogy on that, and the claims that the early kings of Rome, the early Caesars, were actually Edomites. That they were there was a more of a spiritual. It was a different type of spiritual control over Yehuda, as were the others, right? Because it was a family struggle. So I found this kind of. I was thinking about this, and of the four names mentioned here, so we see Bavel, Madai, Jevon, which is the Greeks, and Pharis. Now, Madai is a son of Japheth and one of the 16 grandsons of Noah in the book of Genesis, and we know that they are the Persians or the Iranians. Uh, Yavan was the fourth son of Noah's son Japheth. So one of Noah's grandsons, Japheth's fourth son, and those became the Greeks. Then we see Edom, and that's kind of related there. I was trying to find any idea on Babel. Now we know that's Babylon, obviously the first one, but I was curious if there was an actual name of a child named Babel. I couldn't find it. If there is, forgive me, maybe it's out there. But I was thinking that because all the others seem to be attributed to an actual person. Um, and there, let's see, what else do we have here? This one was interesting. So, again, though, that going back to the birds being related to people and idolatry, and it's kind of interesting because then we see these four kingdoms brought in, and it seems like the whole idea of these kingdoms is that they're like the terrors, and they're coming in and trying to get it's all a test for Yah's people, for Abraham's children. Are you going to be obedient to the Father and believe in his word, or are you going to take part in the idolatry of these kingdoms? Because these are the unclean birds are coming in and trying to disrupt the covenant, right? And that's what we're seeing in this dream. It's the birds that keep coming back and coming back and coming back, and this is a test. Will you be obedient? Will you give in to idolatry, or will you serve the Father? Let's see here. And this was kind of interesting in Genesis 15:14. Oh, I'll go ahead and say this yet. Say this. It says in Genesis 15:13. I had to read this several times. It says, and he said to Abram, this is Yahuwah speaking, knowing thou must know that thy sons shall dwell in a land not their own. Now, we know that they went to Babylon. We know that Israel was dispersed. I think this is specifically talking about Egypt. And it says, because thou has not believed. And they will subjugate and afflict them for 400 years. Well, wait a second. I was a little confused by that. Maybe you guys can help spell this out, because Abraham did believe, and because he did believe, it was accredited to him as righteousness. The same chapter says this. I originally read this and thought maybe the people after him didn't believe, and they were afflicted. And we see that with the wilderness generation. They clearly didn't believe, and leading up to it, I was a little confused by that. How is it that Abraham didn't believe? That's like the only passage that I've so far seen that would insinuate that. So I'll let you guys kind of figure that out. Maybe we can discuss that. But in Genesis 15:14, it says that there would be 250 plagues. And also that the people whom thou shalt serve, I will judge with 250 plagues. Now, and afterwards they shall go forth into liberty with great riches. Again, this must be Egypt being spoken about, because they didn't leave Babylon with great riches. When Israel dispersed, they never went anywhere with great riches. But we know that they looted Egypt and they left that with great riches. So it's kind of interesting to hear that there are 250 plagues. I don't know what all that means. In the book of Jasher, we know that of course there were 10 plagues. In the book of Jasher, they have added plagues, one of which is a very trippy creature that comes out of the Nile, and like it's like this giant, and it like like lifts up the rooftops and reaches in and grabs people, and they're all shrieking. It sounds like a horror film. Um, I'll leave that up to you guys to discuss that as well. I'm going to close on this, and then I'll give Michael the closing commentary. In Genesis 15:16, we see that uh, in the fourth generation of thy sons, they will return hither to inherit. So the children of Israel you'll come back and get the land because the guilt of the Amoray is not yet complete. Well, that's interesting. The Amoray, of course, are the Amorites, and so it seems to be that there's two things going on. Like Yahuwah's like, okay, they're not gonna get the land right away because of like this lack of belief. They're gonna go down to Egypt. But also they're not getting the land right away because the Amorites who are here in the lands, their sins have not the guilt of their sins has not reached its fullness yet. I'm not ready to punish them yet. That's kind of interesting how that works. Now, in the earliest Sumerian texts, all Western lands beyond the Euphrates River, including the modern Levant, were known as the land of the Amorites. So that's kind of interesting. The term Amorites is used in the Bible to, I'm getting this right here from Wikipedia. The term Amorites is used in the Bible to refer to certain highland mountaineers who inhabited the land of Canaan, described in Genesis as descendants of Canaan, the son of Ham. So it's the land of Canaan, but it's also the land of the Amorites. They are described as a powerful people of great stature, like the heights of the cedars, according to Amos 2:9, who had occupied the land east and west of the Jordan. Remember now, they're west of the Euphrates. So the Amorites are a mountainous people all through that region. The height and strength mentioned in Amos, according to this is still reading from Wikipedia, has led some Christian scholars, including Orville J. Navi, who wrote the Navi's topical Bible, to refer to the Amorites as giants. Now, part of that, of course, is what we read in Deuteronomy that the Amorite king was none other than Og. And Michael had some great commentary to say on Og 2 or 3 weeks ago, and how he was like the king of the netherworld, and he seems to be associated with Baal. And I'll hopefully be covering a paper on that, doing some incredible research on this guy and how there was much more to Og than meets the eye than just physicality. There seemed to be something very spiritual going on about him. But anyways, Og himself was the Amorite king. And remember, we read how, according to the Aramaic Targum, Og was specifically kept alive. He was not destroyed because um, Yahuwah personally wanted to keep him alive to see his promises come in with the children of Israel, and Moses, personally killed Og. Anyways, and he was described as the last remnant of the Rephaim, which was also the Amorites. All right, the leader of the Amorites. And I'm just going to end on this right here. I found this interesting in verse 17. And when the sun had set, there was darkness, and behold, Abram saw. Now, the Masoretic, I'll read this first. And it came to pass that when the sun went down in the Masoretic, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those two pieces. Well, the Aramaic Targum basically takes it up a notch and says that Abram, he didn't see a smoking furnace, he saw Gehenna ascending, smoke with flaming coals and burning flakes of fire, wherewith the wicked are to be judged. And behold, he passed between those divisions. He being capitalized here, I'm taking it to be the word of Yahuwah. And I believe that the covenant was always cut with the word of Yahuwah. That he was the one that was going to fulfill his end of it. He was going to die, come and die. He was going to be the final sacrifice. So what struck me here was that we're going to read this part in a few weeks in Genesis 19:28. The same language is used. And this is what it says. When Abraham woke up in the morning, he had the conversation with the angel. He was pleading to save Sodom and Gomorrah. It all goes down in the night. Lot barely escapes at sunrise. It goes up in flames. And it says, and he, Abraham, looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the lands of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And that seems to be the picture they're describing, um, Gehenna, the smoke of their torment rising forever and ever. And I've always stated that from a Hebrew perspective, that um, that you could say the same thing as Sodom and Gomorrah. They were not tormented for an eternity. They were killed, probably instantaneous, though some may have suffered a little bit longer in the flames. But the smoke itself was the picture that the smoke rises forever and ever. It was a picture of their torment rising forever and ever. I just thought that was a little interesting comparison there between the Aramaic Targum and Sodom and Gomorrah. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael. That's the end of my commentary for the night.
All right, great stuff. Get ready, guys. I don't have much, and then we can open it up. Where am I going? Number 13. So last word study for the night. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. That was a prophecy, right? So, but and shall serve them is the word I'm looking for. So Deuteronomy 31, now then, write this song for yourselves and teach it to the sons of Israel. Put it on their lips, so that this song may be a witness for me against the sons of Israel. When I bring them into a land flowing with milk and honey, which I swore to their fathers, and they eat and are satisfied and become prosperous, then they will turn to other gods and serve them, and spurn me and break my covenant. So that's pretty interesting. He's giving them to the land that they were promised, and they still turn to other gods and serve them. Prophetic with Israel. And then I thought it was interesting that, Masoretic says they shall afflict them 400 years. Jasher didn't say that. Jasher 81 says, and the children of Israel journey. Oh, I'll start on number 2. Also, a mixed multitude went up with them, and flocks and herds, even much cattle. And the sojourning of the children of Israel, who dwelt in the land of Egypt, in hard labor, was 210 years. At the end of 210 years, the Lord brought forth the children of Israel from Egypt. So there's a disparity there. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what the Septuagint says. I know there's a big debate on how long they were in Egypt. But yeah. Number 14 says, I'm just going to do Palestinian. And also that people whom shall serve I will judge with 250 plagues. And afterward they shall go forth into liberty with great riches. So numbers guy, I have to do the 250. Some examples. Exodus, there was 250 of fragrant cane. 250, princes of the congregation in Numbers. Number 16 has 3 of them. So Yahweh had 250 censers, 250 men who offered incense. And finally, Ezekiel, the city had 250, it looks like. So I thought that was cool. What do you guys make about that? The 250 that the Targum talks about, I will judge with 250 plagues. And then you see all these 250s as well. 2 more. So number 18, Palestinian says, in that day the Lord ordained a covenant with Abram, that he would not judge therein his sons, but he would deliver them from the kingdom, saying, to thy sons will I give this land, from Nilos of Mitzrayim unto the great river, the river Pharaoth. So, or Euphrates in the KJV. So commentary said that Genesis 15:18, Deuteronomy 1:7, Joshua 1:4, call the Euphrates the great river because it encompasses the land of Israel. They notated that at the creation of the world, the Euphrates was not designated great, with the 4 rivers. But it is called great because it encompasses the land of Israel, which Deuteronomy 4:7 calls a great nation. I thought that was interesting. It wasn't mentioned as great in Genesis, but then, or earlier on in Genesis, but now it is. And finally, real quick, the 21, and the Amorites, the Canaanites, and Girgashites, and the Jebusites. And then Jerusalem Targum literally just says, and the sons of the east. And we've talked about it multiple times in the Targum and this Genesis, that if you're going east, you're walking away from the covenant. And so I thought how the Jerusalem Targum just straight out says it. They just went east. They're the sons of the east. I want to be that. So I'll end it there. That's all I have for 15. Hope you guys enjoyed both Noel and I's, and we'll open it up, I guess.
Yep, class is dismissed. Thank you guys for sitting there through I guess it's been 3 hours now of presentations. So thank you, everyone. It seems like it was a lively discussion tonight about wool and um, what are you guys' thoughts to what Michael and I were talking about, and anything on Melchizedek, anything on Genesis 15, or even if mud fossils, if you have time to think about it.
Good presentation, guys. I've got a few things. Noel, when you said what seems to be discrepancy between, um, you know, because you didn't believe Abraham, your children for 400 years. Another thing is they weren't there for 400 years. That's interesting. But the Bible verse, I want to say it's in James, but I could be completely wrong. Where it says, "I believe, but help my unbelief." So it could be that school of thought where every time this thought came to Abraham, how many times a day that Yah had promised him a son and he doesn't have one, did he believe every single time? Probably not, you know. Um, so it could be said in circumstances he did not believe, but overall he did. And it's kind of the difference in mentality between the Greek and the Hebrews, where Greek is, more like Michael and numbers and statistics and that type of thing. And the Hebrew is more, I define it as romance, where it's more ideology and symbology. Um, so I don't know if that's part of it, but that's my thought. And then also totally agree on the salvation in our uh, as far as Christianity's view. And I don't consider myself a Christian, but uh, the idea that um, you know um, how do I want to say it? We should be more concerned about us being able to obtain salvation than that it's this idea that salvation is a free gift. Like, is it a gift? Yes, but is it free? Well, technically no, because it costs you everything to obtain. If we're not interested in creating a relationship with the Father now, why do we have the idea to even think that we're going to be in an eternal relationship with Him? So, those are my thoughts.
Mic drop.
Yeah, those are some excellent thoughts, and so I to to go over what you said, I think what you stated about Abraham is probably spot on. I mean, Abraham was a dude; he was a real human, and I can only imagine that there were probably some days that went by where he's like, I mean, we saw that in that chapter where he's like, this isn't really working out. So I'm going to hand over the keys of the kingdom to Eliezer. And so that could have been in that moment where, Abraham's trying to kind of work it out on his own instead of letting Elohim do it. So that was a really interesting point on that. On the 400 years, that's a great observation. The it, it makes me wonder with some of the things with the translations, because this is a targum of a targum. It's the Aramaic is a targum of the Hebrew, but then it's a English targum, English translation of a translation, and so we've run into this problem before on numerous different things, and even I said that the two usages of the word is not a very good translation, because it should just be the word, because it literally is the word. But then the other one should be like, it just should say my edict. Why does it say my word? It should say my edict, my law, or whatever. And so it makes me wonder with the 400 years, because this is something a lot of people will discuss, and there were, that many years, but clearly they weren't in slavery for that long. I mean, it was many, many years, even after getting into Egypt, that they became slaves. And so, Moshe showed up. And interestingly enough, if you read Jasher, the Levites never actually ended up in slavery. People don't think about this, but everybody all the Israelites who were slaves, they had to give their consent to Pharaoh to become slaves, and the Levites never did. This is why when Moshe showed up in Egypt, you notice Pharaoh never said, "Hey, get to work." Well, he was a Levite. He wasn't a slave. So Moshe wasn't coming to free the Levites because they were already free. Most people don't put that together. Aaron as well. He wasn't out there working the fields. He was a Levite. And it's just like that today, that where we give our consent to be slaves. And the last thing you said was spot on too, with our salvation and the free gift and all that. And it's really hard to have a conversation with Christians on this, because almost everyone I talk to, they're like, as soon as I talk about his instructions in righteous living, however I phrase it, sometimes I'll say Torah, sometimes I'll say the law, sometimes I'll say instructions in righteous living. I'll try all these different these words on people, and as soon as their alarm bells go off that he's talking about works-based religion, they'll be like, oh, but Jesus, he's our salvation. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? What do you mean he's your salvation? They can't really take it beyond. They're just trained to think, well, he did everything for us, so we don't have to do anything. That's all that means to them. And that's clearly like no reading of the Bible should ever bring anyone to that conclusion. But it's just how people are trained with like these shaded glasses to read scripture. So good stuff.
I posted that Jasher chapter. It's awesome. I recommend reading it, Jasher 65. And then I quoted these 4 verses. But look at number 34. And the Egyptians did not direct their attention to make the children of Levi work afterward, since they had not been with their brethren at the beginning. Therefore, the Egyptians left them alone. Amazing. But I would read that whole chapter. It's awesome.
There is an explanation for the 400 years given in the Legends of the Jews, and I can't remember what it is, unfortunately. But it dates back to a certain thing that happened, I think, with maybe Abraham. And it was from the time of something till they left, and I can't remember what that first event was, but I'll see if I can't look it up.
Yeah, the 400 years was kind of it was almost like a generic phrase that referred from Abraham to Moshe leading them out. And so my understanding is that not even the translators of scripture back then and stuff would have thought that they were actually in slavery for 400 years, but that it was a time frame from the covenant to their deliverance.
So I had a few comments, and I was really fascinated by the Melchizedek part. I've been studying that recently, but I made some notes here. But the first comment goes right along with kind of what we were talking about in the chat too, about the frequency of the garments and linen and stuff. But where the part with Noah's brother, I believe his name was Ner, and his wife, when they put her in the black garments. And you kind of made a comment of that, Noel. It made me think of, so I read that there was this study done by a doctor about the frequency of garments and how, like was mentioned in the chat, linen is 5,000 frequency and wool is 5,000 frequency, but they cancel each other out. And then, cotton has, I think it was like 100 or something like that. And for our bodies to be healthy, I think it has to be like the higher the frequency, the better, but anything less than, I can't remember the exact number, if it was 100, 200, starts giving us a negative health kind of like it starts affecting our health negatively. Well, one other thing that I saw there, a comment from what the doctor's study was, and I can try to find this and share it with the group so you guys can all see it, but was that anything with the color black, any fabric, didn't matter, had a 0 frequency, which I thought was interesting. I'd seen other frequency studies, but that was the first time I heard that. So obviously, it's something, I don't really know how we would even test that, but it's just kind of stuck with me. And I've actually tried to stop wearing black since, like even I have black linen things, but that's what made me think of when I heard your comment about that they put her in black and then they ended up changing her. And I think a lot of times in modern society, we think they were, they didn't know much back then, but I think it's the opposite, where they were much more advanced and, knew much more than we do now. So perhaps that's true. And perhaps they knew that, and putting her in a 0 frequency fabric maybe was because she did something that they thought was shameful, perhaps. And then they changed her out of it when they realized otherwise. Just kind of a thought there. And then I just, to make a comment on today, when people are mourning, they wear black. So I don't know. I find that kind of interesting. But that was one note. Another note I had was about Melchizedek. So I think it was Michael that pointed this out. That Melchizedek actually means my king is righteous, which is very true. And it's very interesting because I've studied that and I've looked up, what does it mean? And there's been kind of maybe this cognitive dissonance in my mind. Just I've read that means king and righteousness. And I speak Arabic actually, and I've studied Hebrew as well. And there's actually a lot of similarities with the languages, just kind of the format for the grammar and a lot of the rules. And anything with an E, like Melki, is like my Melik, like my king. It makes it possessive. So that's true. And for some reason, I just never really put that together until Michael pointed that out. But that's correct. And that's actually very interesting. I found that interesting. And then with the order of Melchizedek, I think Zen has the book Order of the Ancients. And there's one writing in there, the Order of Elijah the Prophet. And I think it pinned Elijah as a Melchizedek as well. And in that book, Order of Elijah the Prophet, was like he was giving instructions to Elisha, that what to do after, his going, because he was kind of passing that torch of Melchizedek onto Elisha. And something I found interesting there, and I want to kind of study this out, who were the Melchizedek lines going down to Yahusha? Because I think you mentioned in one of the readings tonight, somebody mentioned that there were 12. But anyways, so it said, so Elijah, one of the things he mentioned in that writing is that he's giving the keys to Elisha, but not all of them, that he was taking part of the keys back up to, paradise or wherever he was going to be brought back at the end of times, which I thought was really interesting. So there was that note. Another note I had was I think it was Michael who pointed out in Luke 22:15 through 20, where Yahusha said, "I will not drink of this cup again until a kingdom." And I agree. I think that does sound like a Nazarite vow. I've thought that too. So I kind of wanted to just highlight that and just agree with that. I thought that was interesting. And then my last and final, and I'm talking a lot of different things, but my last and final note I had here was about Genesis 15:11. And I found this one interesting because I've read this before, and the first thing it made me think of when I read it was Matthew 24, and it's verse 28. And this was where Yahusha was giving instructions. I know, Noel, you've done a thorough study on Matthew 24 and kind of lined it up with Revelation. But I've always wondered about the and let me find it. I lost my page here for a second. I'm looking at the Hebrew gospel. But this is the part where he's telling them, they're going to tell you, come over here. He's in the wilderness or whatnot. But when they do that, don't want to believe them. And let me find that verse. It says, therefore, if a man will say to you that he is in the wilderness, do not want to go. And if a man will say to you, he is in the cave, and this is obviously referring to himself, his returning. He says, do not be willing to believe it, for just like the lightning which goes out from the east and is seen as far as the west, just so will the coming of the Son of Eloah be. And then here's verse 28. It says, and in whatever place the body will be, there will the vultures gather together. And I had read that before and just always wondered, like, what is he talking about? What does he mean where the place the body will be, that the vultures will gather together? And it always kind of just, I didn't know what he was referencing. I didn't know what he's talking about. But then when because I had read that in the Targum previously, and that's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, is he referencing that? Would they have known because they understood that vultures represented the idolatrous people coming, against the people of Yah? Perhaps is that a reference to that? And then it made me think of, I know this was most likely fulfilled with his, second coming, but does this also have to do with, the final battle where Satan gathers everybody? And, can we take that to ourselves to say, well, wherever the vultures gather, that's where the body will be, that's wherever Satan's, clearly, obviously we're told he's going to gather and go fight against the camp of Yah. So obviously wherever they gather, that's where it's going to be. But I just found that kind of interesting. Like perhaps that's what that's pointing to as well, the Matthew 24:28. And I think that was it for my notes. But it was a very good study. I really enjoyed all of it.
Well, that was some really great commentary that I really enjoyed too. So, You said so much there, and it was all good. I can't even recount everything you said, but uh, on Second Enoch, yes, it says that the first Melchizedek was I think he was the 14th in line. This was the son of Ner, and so there would have been 13 before him, like high priest in the order. One of which may have been his father. I don't know if it was Noah or his father or whatever, but it seemed like his father was a high priest. But then, yeah, there was going to be a final 12. And the last one, of course, of that final number was going to be, we know him to be Yahushua, Messiah. But what you had said, it really makes me wonder, because I was thinking that as I was reading that, like, who are these others? Can we find them out? Eliyahu, Elijah is one obvious, and yeah, his book of the order
And
of the
Noel, you're breaking up pretty badly.
okay. Well, guys,
Oh,
this
you're loud and clear on my end, so
okay. As long as I'm loud and clear on Josh's end, and okay, clear. This always happens at the discussion afterwards, but uh, we know that Eliyahu, Elijah's one contender, obviously to be one of perhaps the 12. I wonder if Shem started it, and then there was like, you know, I would think David would be one of them. I've heard good arguments that he was. But it would be fun, as you were saying, to actually go through and try to pinpoint who they all were, and was there a general line of them. So that was a really good thought. Great job. Anybody else had any thoughts?
I have to ask, no, what'd you think of the wisdom in that order of Melchizedek? I thought that was awesome. If you remember, I can post the verse if you don't recall it.
I remember you talking about it, but post it again.
Sure. The bot doesn't work. Let me go find it.
While he's looking for that, I had thought about, when you were speaking on Abraham shooing away the birds and all that. I was always on the understanding that Yahweh had put Abraham to sleep. I guess I don't know if that was like a Christian doctrine that I'd had, or that's what it says in like the regular word, that he was kind of put into a trance. I do know that it does say that he was shooing away the birds, but I just thought that was really interesting when you were reading that this evening, that all that whole thing about him with the chasing all that stuff away. I thought that was really interesting.
Well, he was put into a dream immediately afterwards, where he saw the four kingdoms of the world leading all the way up to Rome/Edom, and so yeah, I guess the question was he asleep when the actual covenant was cut, and when the when he saw the torch pass between it and the fires of Gehenna, he could have been asleep by that point. But it is clear that according to Jasher and other texts, that he did clear birds out. So
Yeah, I knew he cleared the birds out. Yeah, I guess maybe I just misunderstood what you were reading there, because I was always under the assumption that he was put into a bit of a trance, and that it was Yahweh that had walked through it with him, like for him. That yeah, okay, must have understood. Thanks.
So so Michael, I'll read what he posted here, and what is the actual book reference here to this?
That was Proverbs 9, 1 through
Prover-
6.
Proverbs 9, 1 through 6. Okay.
Spe-
Oh, that's
specifically number 5, because that's basically a Melchizedek trait. But good.
so wisdom hath builded her house, she hath hewn out her 7 pillars, which I find that to be fascinating, especially since there's 7 spirits coming out of Yahuwah. She hath killed her beast, she hath mingled her wine, she hath also furnished her table. Um, and again, that's describing like the woman of the house. For she's always like in a lot of these passages, she's putting up the meats and the food and the furnishing and that kind of stuff. It's always exciting to think about. She does her womanly duty. She hath sent forth her maidens. She crieth upon the highest places of the city. Whoso is simple, let him churning hither. As for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, and then here's verse 5, come eat of my bread and drink of my wine, which I have mingled. Forsake the foolish and live and go in the way of understanding. That was a great connection. And obviously, the Melchizedek priesthood is the heavenly priesthood. So that's pretty awesome thought. And but I'm just going to reiterate this, not probably where Michael was wanting to go with this, that people speak, they think of, I don't always know how people think of the Holy Spirit or the Ruach HaKodesh, but you get these descriptions of the Ruach HaKodesh in heaven, and she's like setting out dinner plates, and I don't say that to be like funny or something, but it's just it's a very different idea than how we speak of her in the church. I'll just put that because a lot of descriptions they just depict her that way. So
Does it open the possibility of women being in the order? I think it does.
yeah,
And
I don't.
And it sounds to me it's the wedding supper of the Lamb, that verse. Like Spirit and the bride say. I remember you used to say that she's.
Yeah, you see the Father is sending out the invites, and the wisdom is the one. She's getting all the servants out. She's getting the best meats, the best wine. She's getting all ready. She's so excited for this, and she wants all her children to come in and participate. She doesn't send out the invites. The Father sends out the invites, and as you guys know the parable, the prophets were killed off, and finally the king sends his own son, and they kill him off. But yeah, that's it. It's again, it's just a very, very different way than that has really changed my thinking about the Ruach HaKodesh when really digging into those and seeing her as wisdom. Yeah, as you were saying, Mary, most of the church make her masculine. They're three dudes in heaven. As above, so below. They're just three roommates in heaven, all co-equal in power and all coexisting from throughout eternity. Just the three dudes.
Any comments on Arcturus and the bear?
Well, I will say, guys, I'm really encouraged by the notes that were taken, and some of you who had commented. That really is encouraging, and yeah. So thanks for that, and just always remember week for week. Just jot down some notes and bring them up afterwards. And Michael's looking at it from one angle, I'm looking at it from another angle, but I know you guys have all your angles and your life experience and your research and study experience as well. And like learning about the black, that was really fascinating, and how that works with linen or wool, and that was some great commentary.
And I remember on Thursday nights, Noah would always get crickets, and now I understand it once he asked me to do these studies. So we definitely appreciate your comments. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, Irene, I'll hand over to you in just a second. It's it really is, because when you put all this research and this energy into fleshing something out and giving it, it's I have to understand. I was just on the phone with somebody today, and he wanted me to talk to him, and he said that and I'm not tooting my own horn here, guys. I'm just, because I was talking to my wife about this, and I'm like, I was telling her at dinner time, I really don't think of myself as a very deep person. I just think of myself as an average person. And she's like, oh no, you're deep. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, she's like, nobody can talk to you because you're so deep. And so I had a guy I was talking to on the phone today, and he's like, he's like, I love your research, but I really struggle comprehending what you're saying. And so I'm always trying to, to speak in a way hopefully everyone understands me. But so when you guys have your commentary afterwards, and you guys talk about things like that, and it really is encouraging, and it really helps the energy, and so I do appreciate it. Go ahead, Irene. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was really interested in that frequency. Where can I go to find out more about that? Mary
Oh,
know?
well, it would be whoever was discussing that in the room. Michael, if you have any thoughts on it.
I
Yeah,
posted a
Mary.
good study. Let me try to find the link and I'll post it again on it. But yeah,
There's lots of
Mary
good
would know.
stuff lately in the Torah garments section. You can lots of links and videos and comments.
There's
I don't know
also
where
a group,
I don't know where to
also a
get
group
that.
on Facebook.
Yeah? Facebook?
There's also a group on Facebook called Linen Railroad, run by Nathan and Chelsea Reynolds. They don't like to talk about the whole frequency thing, but they do provide resources to be able to find linen, and they even give away linen for free as well.
I didn't get the reference to where I go on Facebook.
It's
What do I
called
type in?
the Linen Railroad. It's a group on
Railroad.
Facebook. It's a private group, but you can look it up. The Linen Railroad.
Okay, it'll show up, huh? Okay. And I wanted to type something, but I don't know where to type if I wanted to ask questions other than using the microphone.
Well, okay, so if you want to ask questions, so right now you are in the voice chat room. Right
Okay.
above the voice chat room, there is the general voice chat, and that is where people are writing all throughout the talk, and they're having conversations. So you could just go in there, drop a question, and either Michael or I usually see it. Sometimes we miss them because people are typing so fast, but which is great. It's great to see lively conversations in there. So just go to the room right above this, and that's where we discuss or talk. Well, sometimes I'm dropping comments in there too.
I did see it with the general voice before, but now I don't see it on the side panel. Isn't that weird? I like to practice even now, but I don't know where to go. I don't see it. I see voice connected, it says.
Okay, so there's the diaspora of Yasharel, and there's like there might be an arrow there. I wonder if there's no, maybe it's not collapsible. I don't know. Oh, the weekly studies. So maybe it might disappear if you there's a little arrow that goes down or the side. Sometimes if you toy with
Okay.
that, it might cause rooms to disappear. That could
There,
be it.
I scrolled up and down, and it joined up with the voice chat. So it is general voice chat right now. I see it.
Okay.
I had to scroll it. Okay. Sorry, I'm not very good at navigating here, so thank you for that. So what do I do? Just click on general chat and then
General voice chat, and then type out what you want to say.
oh, there it is. Oh my goodness.
No problem.
If you can send me those links or that, because when you send me links, I don't know where to retrieve them. Like, where do you send it so that I could see? The last week I tried to get on the Holocaust, and I don't know if you posted it or not, but I don't know where to get it.
Oh, well, I haven't. I'm like a couple weeks behind. I haven't even got into the Holocaust piece yet, and yeah. So Irene, if anybody wanted to drop anything,
I messaged her. I just sent the link in a message, so she should be able to get that.
okay. So Irene, maybe you can see where your private messages are in Discord, and Michael sent you some information.
Yeah, she had written here today, and I wrote her back and told her it would be on BitChute soon, and I gave her a link to the BitChute. She may not know how to get back in there. Just go check your messages, and it's all in there already, Irene.
Where? I'm laughing because I don't know where is. Okay, I can see where I could write the message, but I don't know where anybody wrote me anything.
Well, I'm not great at explaining tech stuff. So are you on a phone or your computer?
I'm on a laptop computer.
Okay. So if it's anything, because I'm obviously on my computer right now. If it's anything like mine, there is it almost looks like Mickey Mouse's shorts. So it looks like, it always reminds me of Mickey Mouse's shorts with like two like buttons in there. But it's the top button and it says direct messages. So you're obviously able to get to the unexpected cosmology, because that's that one button you push. But up on the very top left, there's a circle and it says direct messages. If you scroll your mouse over it, and then if you click on that, you're going to see a list of people who have written you. They should all come up and you'll see if they're online. Like I see Rebecca is online right now. She's got a green light. And you could click on that and you'll see what she wrote. I'm not sure if you're following me right now. But
Okay, so the direct messages.
yeah, you click on
Then
direct
underneath,
messages.
then underneath is Michael, and then underneath him is Rebecca.
Right. So
Okay.
they showed up because they went into your mail. That's your mailbox. And so Michael just wrote you, and before that, Rebecca just wrote you. So if you click on those, then you can be in a direct conversation with each of them. You can see
Ah,
what they wrote you, and you can respond back to them.
okay. If I do it now, will I disrupt something?
No, I
No.
mean, you should be able to go all over the Discord and type. I see people having conversations in all different rooms while I'm talking, so that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Just be sure to turn off your microphone if you're not talking, just
Oh.
so you know.
Yes, I'll turn it off now. I was taking notes, so should just throw this out there, what I wrote here. Should I or not?
Yes, please do. If you have any,
Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, where did I write it? There was something that I wrote here. Okay, Noah was. I'll skip that one because that's not clear. You mentioned the badge of priesthood.
yes, and in Second Enoch, yes.
Okay, so what I wrote. Well, I'd like to hear what you have to say about the badge of priesthood.
I don't. I think I put it out there. Like, what do you guys think? Because they
Okay.
recognize what the badge of priesthood is. I don't know what that looked like.
I remember having a study where the badge of the priesthood, what I thought might be, was the ephod that they carried on their chest, and it had all the stones of the tribes of Israel on it. That I don't know what that represented. Does anybody recall
Well,
the badge?
yeah. So the Levites, which is different than the Melchizedeks, they had an ephod on them with all the different jewels that represented the different tribes, all 12 tribes, and so that's kind of interesting. I probably should have stated that badge could also be read like mark, but again, I'm reading from an English Targum, and I didn't want to just make up words, but I almost wonder if it was saying the mark of the priesthood, which would be very, very interesting, because we talk about
Oh,
different like mark of the beast and so on and so forth. But again,
oh,
I don't know what it is that they recognize as the mark of the order of the Melchizedek priesthood. I don't know what that is.
okay. So the it was the tribes that carried the ephod on their chest, not the Melchizedek priests. Would that be
Well,
correct?
Well, yeah. So in Leviticus, we get great details on the Levite priests and what they are to wear, and the ephod is described. I don't know which chapter, but it's in Leviticus, and we never get clothing attire for the Melchizedek. And the Melchizedek is a different priesthood than the Levites, and in fact, that's one of the
Yeah.
themes of Hebrews. Obviously, that the Torah was transferred by necessity from the Levites to the Melchizedeks. And what's interesting, so this is a whole discussion that I've never gotten into, but then you see um, a prophecy that during the millennial kingdom that the Levites would be back. And so you don't really see the Melchizedeks ruling the earth. It seems like the Levites rule the earth and the Melchizedeks are in heaven. You don't see, some of the interesting connections, comparisons, or contrasts is that the Levites, I've never seen a Levite ascend to heaven. Now, Moshe went to heaven, but he came back. Um, but I've never seen the Levites get transferred to heaven or to Eden, but plenty of Melchizedeks did. That's really interesting. Just like Yahusha went to heaven, and that was in a long tradition of the Melchizedek. So, and he wasn't a Levite. So there are differences to be noted between the two.
Okay, looks like one belongs to the heavenly and the other one belongs to the earthly.
Right, and that's at least my understanding, and why that's the whole important theme of Hebrews, that it was by necessity. It wasn't that the Torah was done away with, but the Torah was transferred to the Melchizedeks under Yahushua Messiah, because he's not a Levite, but he's our high priest under that order instead of the Levite order. So it's still the Torah being fleshed out, lived out, but through a different order of priests than would be Aaron, the high priest, the Levite.
And it's based on your behavior too. So I'm assuming a Levite that behaved well could become a Melchizedek.
Interesting.
And the other thing I noted here, there was three. The second one is, it said to take you to another land, and that sparked a thought in my mind when I saw the video that this realm we live in is part of a bigger realm, like other land. And then I think you said there was probably Jerusalem or Israel is not even on this realm. It could be other lands that we don't know about yet.
Remind me again where it said that.
Yeah, I is there slide numbers? Yeah, there was pages, but I didn't write it down. I didn't think of it then. So, what I'm asking you to take you to another land, where you spoke about it, on what page that was? Is that what you're asking me?
Was it the Genesis presentation or the
I think it was the earlier one.
the mud fossil? Okay, that oh man, that I remember saying that line, and I want to get the context of that down right, because yeah, that has my interest as well. And I was thinking a lot about that. Was the context, was it Moshe? Or oh man, whatever. I can't comment on that until I see the actual verse in front of me. But I've been thinking a lot about that, because in Deuteronomy we finished our Torah portions today, and which is exciting, and we finished our fourth cycle going through it as a family. And the last chapter, particularly in the Targum of Deuteronomy, chapter 30, I think it ends with 33. It might be 34, but the sacred number 33. And it talks a lot about the millennial kingdom in there. And interestingly enough, I was looking at it, it never says that Israel is going to inhabit the millennial, that actual land, the millennial kingdom. I thought that was really interesting. And it talked about Moses saw, like, I think, another land. I'd have to go back into it again, and I need to really study it out, because you guys know my thoughts on that. But I think you guys probably do, that the land changed. It changed in the millennial kingdom, that it was not the land of Israel anymore. That Yah divorced that land. So,
You're muffled a bit. And I can't hear you. Sorry, you're a bit
okay.
muffled. There you go.
Well, it's probably because it's that time of night, and you guys know how the FBI like to shut me down after they're kind enough to let me give my presentation, but then they like shutting me down.
Somebody putting their hand over your mouth.
Anyways, thank you for all that, all those notes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to ask you a question, Noel, about Did you mention, or was it, well, Michael was reading where there was something about uh, Abram and Nimrod, like they had interaction or they existed at the same time? I thought that they were separated by a long period of time.
Okay, so there's two proposed timelines put forward in the Bible, and it's going to depend on what version you're reading. If you are reading from the Greek LXX, which basically nobody reads from today, at some point in history, the church decided they were no longer going to go by the LXX. They decided they were going to go by the Hebrew Masoretic. And the Hebrew Masoretic, which is the youngest of all translations, um, it puts forward a timeline which would state, like, if you've heard people say that we're like right around the year 6000 of history, that's because the Masoretic deems it so. According to the LXX, the timeline put forward was that it's my timeline I'm going with that I feel is the most accurate, is that Messiah arrived in the year 5500, and that in the year 6500 years later the millennial kingdom came in. Now, um, according to the Masoretic, Yahushua Messiah arrived around in the year like 4000. So right there you have a discrepancy of about 1500 years that are separated. That's a huge difference. And so the Masoretic actually will cut out, like, I think it's Shem's grandson. They cut him out. They do some cheats. And according to the Masoretic timeline, uh, I think Abraham arrived like 400 years after Noah's flood or something in the whereabouts. Whereas in the LXX, he arrives about 1,000 years after the flood. So huge difference. So that's one of the things that are hotly debated, because if I'm saying the LXX is correct, how in the world could Abraham coexist with Nimrod?
Well,
How
if Nimrod was a Nephilim, then he probably lived a long time, right?
precisely? Okay, so as I have pointed out, there are three players. Okay, so my obviously, however you look at this, somebody came in and said we are no longer going with this timeline. Either the LXX is correct or the Masoretic is correct. Interestingly enough, there are a bunch of books that all agree with the LXX, and then there are a bunch of books that agree with the Masoretic. The thing is, though, is that all the books that agree with the LXX, all the timelines are precise. All the books that agree with the Masoretic, they're all off. Jasher doesn't fully agree, but they tend to, they're on the Masoretic timeline. Jubilees, I don't think agrees. They're all off. And so somebody came in and they changed the years. They were trying to hide something. My view is that they were hiding the millennial kingdom. They were hiding what year, because it's interesting that the gospel of Nicodemus ends with the LXX timeline. And Pontius Pilate approaches the priest of the temple, and the priests say that they added up the years and that it was 5,500. Messiah arrived just as he said he would, and that that brings in the point that the kingdom would be ushered in 500 years later. They, I think, when they realize that, they're like, "Oh shoot, we got to go in and change all this, right? We got to hide this from people." So I think that the LXX is more correct. Now, that brings in the issue of three individuals: Nimrod, Shem, and Og. All three of them don't make sense on a purely material level in the LXX. They shouldn't exist. They shouldn't coexist together. Nimrod should have been dead years before Abraham was born, and yet, according to Jasper, Nimrod is trying to put Abraham to death as a baby, and then as an adult, he throws him into into a furnace. Um, and that is according to the Aramaic Targum, as well as the writings of Abraham and so on and so forth. And so I'm working on a piece. It's been working on for several months, and maybe I'll finish it and present it. And I teased it a couple weeks ago. Everyone seemed to react really well to it, and showing that there appears to be several lives of Nimrod. Um, and he appeared. My theory is that the Nimrod himself is a titan named Gilgamesh, who was alive before the flood. Gilgamesh was killed. Gilgamesh reappeared again after the flood as a giant, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The same Gilgamesh as Nimrod. and that there were actually multiple Nimrods. One account has Shem actually in an epic Lord of the Rings style battle approaching Nimrod with an army, and Shem personally cuts Nimrod up. And Semiramis, who is his mom, then goes and does the profane things with his his member. That was after Shem killed him. But then we read in Jasher that Yaakov killed him years later. So it's like, well, what's going on, right? And then of course, Og, is on surface level, he was a giant, but deeper, the guy was a Rephaim, which is actually a shade. Uh, he's actually like a god, like a divine being in a way. He's not. He's actually he was the Canaanites refer to him as the protector of the graves, and he would protect them. So it's interesting that when Moses and Israelites are coming in, he's coming in to protect the land, and Moses kills him. So there's something more going on there. If he was the king of the underworld, he's kind of closely associated with Baal. And then with Shem, as I pointed out, that by time Abraham is born, I think Shem is already dead. He's Melchizedek by this point. He's actually ascended, and he is Shem school is a supernatural school. All accounts seem to paint that picture. It's not purely material. It's not a post-Newtonian type of school you could go to. So that's what I was saying, that those three people, and again, I'll be giving a presentation on this, and I think it'll be really interesting to show that you can actually bring the two timelines together, and it still makes sense. You don't have to throw out, like, if you go with the LXX, you don't have to throw out Dasher, you don't have to throw out Jubilees, you don't have to throw out Masoretic. They still make sense. Just because someone went in and fudged the numbers around. So
Well, that's great. Thank you for answering my question.
yeah, hopefully I was able to answer it and with clarity. And so
Exciting than I thought. It was way more exciting than I thought it was going to be. The answer. So pretty wild that there's so many potential histories.
Irene, just so you know too, I'm gonna shut off. I don't know if you can shut off your microphone, just so there's no back noise. If you're not going to.
I was gonna make a comment, but
Oh, please do.
let's see. What was I? What is this wasn't it. It just left me. But what's LXX? That's like 70.
Yeah, correct.
70 what? It's a
So-
manuscript, or what is that?
Okay, so apparently I sound like I'm underwater right now, so apologies everyone. You guys know what happens at the end of the nights. It's like it's so anyways, the LXX means 70. And it is the Septuagint, the Greek Septuagint, and apparently the 70 was to represent the 70 scribes that put it together. It's very almost odd that there are also 70 nations, 70 Elohim, but there are apparently these 70 scribes that put it together. So the LXX just it's I guess kind of like a scholarly nerd way to refer to the Greek Septuagint.
I was kind of looking into the Septuagint and its origin, and it doesn't look like it's authentic. So, and then the so-called New Testament was rewritten by the papal system, and that was rewritten in Latin. So they're both the same type of people that wrote those, presented those to us. And
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, everyone has their opinions. I think that the LXX is the more accurate. I think that the best, I'll use the word scholarly. I think the best case to make is the LXX. Now, for example, um, um, here's what I mean by this. I believe that there was a Hebrew language that closely lined up with the LXX. Now, even of course, if we're going by the Aramaic Targum, it appears very different than both. I think that there was probably a lot whittled down. One of the reasons I read all these different books is because I just want to get at the truth. I want to know, what are they saying? What do these texts mean? What are the variations and why? And I obviously don't know what the ultimate true text is. But what's interesting is that many have commented that Yahusha, as well as the Paul and the epistle writers, all seem to quote from the Greek LXX. Josephus does as well. Now, what's interesting about Josephus is that he claims he gives a lot of stuff away. Like he blunders a lot. Like he was clearly not in on the later deception, and I think part of that is because the Jews hated Josephus, and he betrayed them, so they kind of left him alone. And I think that's where we catch him on a lot of stuff. Josephus claims that he was writing based on Hebrew text, that he was getting information from Hebrew text, and yet it all sounds like the Greek LXX. So either Josephus was lying and he was just getting from the Greek LXX, which seems kind of lame. He's like, no, really, guys, I've got these Hebrew texts here and I'm not sharing them with you, but they sound a lot like the Greek LXX. So my point is that Yahusha, the epistle writers, and Paul, I don't think they were quoting the Greek LXX. I think they were quoting a Hebrew text that no longer exists, that closely aligns with the LXX. And some of the earliest church fathers as well were doing the same, and they flipped the script and somewhere along the lines, and they decided they weren't going to go with that anymore. They seem to my theory is that they lined up with some sort of conspiracy with the Jews to go with the Masoretic. That's my view, and everyone has the right to their opinion. I could be totally wrong.
I was reading about the different manuscripts that they used, and there was one that was found in a monastery in Egypt. And it was used for kindling. And this guy, Constant Waldruff or something, his last name, I'm trying to find his name here, but anyway, he got a hold of that manuscript, and he said that was the closest of the manuscripts that was to truth. And I was just looking forward to share that, but I could type it in there later on.
Was it the Old Testament? Was it the Old Testament or the New Testament?
Oh, that's the New Testament.
Okay, yeah, you're probably referring to the St. Catherine's manuscript that was found, the not the Vaticanus, but the Codex Sinaiticus, I believe. That's called
It's that one.
Yeah, it's that one. Yeah, the wastebasket story. So those are those are fighting words with anyone who may be a King James only. I don't know how I feel about all that anymore. I feel most comfortable with the Textus Receptus, and that's what I know the Sephra uses. The Codex Sinaiticus is just one single text, whereas the Textus Receptus is many texts brought together. Obviously the Codex Sinaiticus as well as the Vaticanus are the two Greek texts that are used for almost every single Bible out there, starting with the NIV and going down the list. And I'm not a King James only person, just so everyone knows, but the King James and I think the Wycliffe and very few will actually use the Textus Receptus, which is what I feel most comfortable with. So
They called it Olive, the Olive Syntheticus or something like that.
The Codex Sinaiticus.
Yeah, but it was also in Hebrew, Olive something.
Okay.
Yeah, same name, but just in Hebrew.
Okay.
Olive like ABC, Olive.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Very good.
So I think that was it for my questions here.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Irene. And Jayland or Joshua said on here that he asked who said that the Levitical priest could earn being a Melchizedek priest earlier, and Michael said that, and Michael's response was, or his reason was actually a really good one, because there doesn't seem to be I guess there seems to be no argument ever put forward that I ever seen that there was a specific bloodline. Now, obviously, the sons of Seth, that was a bloodline, and you don't see the sons of Cain becoming a Melchizedek, but the idea is that yes, even a Levite could become a Melchizedek. based on their behavior, not their bloodline. That makes total sense. I mean, why would you discredit a Levite if some other tribe could become one? So
That's interesting. I've never thought about it that way. I've always understood that it was Melchizedek priesthood, then Levitical priesthood, and then transitioned back to the Melchizedek priesthood. But it's an interesting thought, and it's something I think that you see, especially in the renewed covenant, like the story of the 10 virgins, the 5 having their lamps and the 5 not. And it, I think it supports the idea that there's different, and I think you've talked about this a little bit, Noel, and you as well, Michael, that there's different levels in the kingdom. Like you can be a believer but not be the bride, and a believer but not be in the kingdom. And I think that ties in here with what you're saying, at least if I'm understanding correctly. So I think that's a very interesting thing that you brought up that I've never thought about, Michael and Noel.
yeah, Michael's probably talked about that some, and one of the I there's so many things I want to do a study on, guys, but one of the ones I've been wanting to do for some time, I think it would be helpful for everyone, is just to look at the temple structure, how it's laid out, and then look at it from a believing, faithful obedience perspective. For example, we know that in the temple there was the outer court of the Gentiles. The outer court, mind you. Now, they were still able to go in and they could still be saved, but they're in the court of the Gentiles. And so you hear that all the time from Christians. They're like, I'm not a Hebrew, I'm a Gentile. I'm like, okay, you want that's your aspiration. You want to be in the outer court of the Gentiles for all eternity. They don't think of it that way. They think of it almost like this we're all going to be equals and there's nobody going to be greater. I hear this all the time. And, it doesn't really matter what life you live. We'll just all get a reward and we'll all be able to enter his presence. And I'm like, no, we won't. We will not all be in his presence equally. If it's anything like the setup on earth, how it's been described in scripture. And when this should also, when it comes to working out our faith, our salvation with fear and trembling, we really need to think about this. Because as you get closer to the Most High in the temple system, it starts out with hundreds or probably thousands of Levite priests, just thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And then as you go in closer, it really starts dwindling down until you finally get to the high priest. And once a year, the high priest is going into the Holy of Holies. And it's like that in our spiritual walk. I think all of you can probably relate to this. That as closer as you want to get to Yah, and you start getting more knowledge, more wisdom, you start knowing Him better. You start being more obedient to Him. You start finding more and more people that are falling away. They're like, yeah, I'm not really interested in that, and they're just they don't have the depth as you do because they're just not interested. They don't want to know Him in the same way, and you start finding the walk to be lonelier and lonelier. It starts becoming harder to find somebody who is on that journey with you, because it's the same way as the temple system. You've already left the outer court of the Gentiles. They're way back there. They all think that you've gone crazy and you've lost it. Because that's where the party is at, right? The court of the Gentiles. And the thing is, though, is that the fear and trembling part is that everybody needs. I can't say this enough. Is that the closer you get to Elohim, the more dangerous and treacherous it gets. The more you are under attack from Satan, the more you are likely to fall away. The people in the church who are there, I've heard it in this room from you guys. You came out of the church and you would say like things like, we were kind of in this circular mode. We never really got anywhere. We never really learned anything, never resolved anything. It was just set up to kind of keep you there tithing. Um, and when you're on this journey, there's so people are in that their whole life. It's just this. It's like the caucus race from Alice in Wonderland. And all trying to get dry, and nobody's getting dry. And what happens is that I think Yahuwah is pruning, and we're seeing the falling away the closer you get, because Yahuwah's like, nope, nope, nope. He doesn't make the cut. He doesn't make the cut. He doesn't make the cut. You're not coming in my presence. Gone, gone. And so as if we want to get closer to Yahuwah, we got to take this seriously, and we got to be like, yeah, I want to live a set apart holy life. I want to get closer to you. and then he will bring us, closer in, but we're going to feel alone. We're not going to, we're not going to have the people around us. And so just something to think about. And I would like to really dig into a study on that and just show, compare the temple to our everyday life. And if anybody,
Well,
go ahead.
I have a little comment on the structure of the temple. You know how make a picture of the temple that was in Jerusalem, and it's rectangular. Sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Oh, okay. Um, I saw this guy by the name of Andrew Hoy, and he said that the temple was the shape like of the flat earth. It was like a dome. It was not rectangular and all that. So I found it really interesting. So I really was looking into that. And Moses was the only one that saw that pattern. The Yahuwah showed it to him, the structure from heaven, and so he knew how to build it. But now people are trying to build what Moses, what is described in Scripture, and so they build this rectangular shape of the structure of the temple. And Andrew Hoy comes along, and he was visiting in Israel, and it was by the Ruach that shared him about the curtains, because he wondered how come they're talking about these curtains. And so because he was trained in some kind of anyway, so he knew the dynamics of what was spoken there, and so he constructed the the temple, and it was round, just like the flat earth, domed flat earth, but it's not really a circle. It's got like 10 sides, but in a circular fashion. And all this stuff about dismantling it and all that, it must have taken a lot of time, because over 1,000 people could fit into that. So I don't know if anybody went to look at Andrew Hoy temple structure or whatever that's called now. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I have Andrew. A couple years ago, Andrew Hoy actually wrote an article for Cosmology, and you guys can find it on there. And he talks about the temple, and I should say the tabernacle in the wilderness, and that was good. So, Leah asked, "Can I explain the falling away?" And falling away, in my opinion, always refers to falling away from obedience to the Torah, and so since I've been on this walk, trying, wanting to pursue Yahuwah's instructions and righteous living for my life and the life of my family, I have never seen as much falling away as I have in the last few years. Growing up in the church, you'd see people leave the church now and then, and for all I know, they were probably pursuing the Father. I look back at that. I probably thought they were like, back then, I'm like, oh, these people fell away. They were probably fleeing the church to pursue the Father. But um, as I've stated time and again to everyone in this room, um, that if you want out of this, there is no shortage of excuses out there. I mean, you could find plenty of justifications. Let me explain this. In Romans chapter 5, I think it was, Paul talks about, he says the very provocative statement that he says, wherever the Torah is, rebellion and sin increase. And he's saying that that when and he was talking about the wilderness generation, that they did not rebel against Yahuwah until they were presented with his Torah. When they saw the Torah, they didn't like the character of the Father. They didn't like who he was. They didn't want to be obedient, and they rebelled. And so the more I see Torah, the more I see people rebelling against it. Before they're presented it like that, it's not like they don't really have anything to rebel against. And so what happens is in this Torah walk, it becomes it's kind of like a trending thing online, and in the Torah community, a lot of people, they come into it for different reasons. One of the reasons probably is because they want to stick it to the man, they want to stick it to the church and show them how wrong they are, and they're never really circumcised of the heart. But they start coming into this and slapping people on top of the head with their Torah and their Bible and be like, you need to obey this and this kind of stuff, whatever. It could be tons of different things. But ultimately they come into it and they go like, I really don't, they give it 2 or 3 years and they're like, I don't like who the Father is. I don't like who he's revealed to be in this. I don't want this anymore. This is a burden to me. I don't like keeping the Sabbath. I don't like these laws. I don't like all this kind of stuff. And if you want to find a justification to prove the Bible is pagan or it was plagiarized from some Babylonian book or whatever, just whatever it is. Jesus is Dionysus or whatever. There are tons of justifications you can make, everyone can make to say, I'm not doing this anymore and leave. And the reason I say that is because that's what I mean by the falling away. That I have seen more people on this walk in Torah, on this narrow road, fall away than I've ever seen in my life. And so everybody needs to be on their guard, because if you're coming closer to the truth, don't take that for granted. Don't be cocky or proud. Realize that there are more darts coming your way, and you can very easily succumb to the fragility of your own mind, the darkness of your own mind. If it's not, as Psalms 119:105 says, if it's not the menorah, the lamp of Yahuwah guiding the way, then you're in total darkness. And you may think you're in the light, but you're a self-illumination that is not the Ruach HaKodesh. So
I would agree with that. I've seen more people in my walk fall away more so in this thing, that it's really actually scary, and to even go and even renounce not just Yahusha, but just going and renouncing Yahweh, like not even believing in a creator of the heavens and the earth. And it is kind of scary when you think about it. And that's why I think it's really important that we do stay humble and that we're constantly praying without ceasing, and trying to encourage one another instead of tearing, each other down.
yeah, it has seeing all that has happened around me. It has really, in a way, it's just made me praise the Father so much more, of like thank you that I have not fallen away. It's all by you. It's not by anything I did, because the fact that I'm still standing in this, with how many body counts there has been of people dropping to the left and right like flies around me. The number of people that have come to cosmology and have fallen away. Um, it's and it's just not this ministry. It's all the ministries. You go to any of the Torah, anyone that like people very close and dear to them falling away, and and to see actual leaders and all sorts of stuff. It's like it's humbling. It's like, wow, like I just pray that Yah never allows that to happen to me, because it's a very real possibility for a lot of us, and we just need to be on our guard. This is why it says that Yahusha is our shield, right? Our salvation. So if you remove that shield, what's going to happen? Now just think about that.
Yeah, exactly. If you, that and that's the thing, is that if you remove that shield, I was going to say something, but I forgot. So excuse me.
I know it's that time of night, isn't it? Well, some of you guys are on the West Coast, and it's only 8 o'clock at night. It's getting late here for me.
So I have something to add, if I can, about the priesthood and Melchizedek and the bloodline of Yahusha. So and I actually have a question on that too. But so the way I always understood it was Jacob. I don't know if Jacob would have been a Melchizedek and if it would have passed down to him, but I thought I read somewhere, or I understood at some point, that Jacob would have had that to be passed down. And then because Reuben sinned, by taking his father's concubine, that the inheritance was split. It was no longer it was supposed to all go to Reuben, but it was split. So now Levi got the priesthood, Yehuda got the kingship, and then Joseph got the rights as the firstborn, which went to Ephraim. And then that's where the Levitical priesthood went down the line. And then Yahusha came back about and got the Melchizedek priesthood. It was turned back over. And then, but then seeing, that Elijah was possibly a Melchizedek, or was, from according to the book, the order of Elijah, and then, passed down to Elisha after him. And so there would have been two priesthoods going at the same time, like the Melchizedek one and the Levitical. And then also to add, Yahusha would have, I mean, stop me if I'm wrong, but he would have been of both the Levitical bloodline and Yehuda, because if we look at Yehuda, Judah, Yehuda himself, he started off the line with Tamar, and was she not a daughter of Levi? So he would have had both bloodlines, and even going down to Mary, she was the cousin of Elizabeth. And if we look at where it talks about John the Baptist, and I forget which, it's like the beginning of one of the Gospels, but it tells us that she was of the daughters of Aaron. So, and being Mary, being her cousin, she had to have had, Levitical bloodline as well. So I believe he had both through Mary, both the bloodline of Judah and Levi. So I guess that's, let me know your thoughts on that. And then also, what are your thoughts on both the Melchizedek and Levitical priesthood going on at the same time?
I'm confused on where you got Tamar being from Levi, because she was either the daughter or granddaughter of Shem. I mean, Levi was a brother of Yehuda, so I'm not sure where you got that from.
Yeah, I'll have to look. I mean, maybe I'm not right, but I thought somewhere it said that she was a daughter of a priest, and that and maybe, so is it Shem? That's where the daughter of the priest came? And I guess I assumed she would have been the daughter from
No,
Levi, but that,
she was
oh, go ahead.
she was either a daughter or a granddaughter, depending on which text you read. I'm more so, and I don't know whether she was a daughter or granddaughter, but either way, yeah, she came from Shem, and Shem was a priest, and obviously Melchizedek. So she was I guess, genetically related to a Melchizedek, but then so were all of them, right? Abraham was, and the only difference with her is that she was more closely related than Yaakov, being several generations removed. Um, but yeah, I mean, what you said is all true. I mean, obviously Reuben, he lost his inheritance, and it got split up between the three of them, and the kingship went to Yehuda, and so from that point forward, it was always Yehuda that had to rule as king. Always. It's almost like I've used the analogy of C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia, that they would say, in Narnia, amongst all the talking animals, that things were never right unless if there was a son of Adam or daughter of Eve ruling. And it was the same thing, that it was always had to be so even when I did the study on Israel being transferred to a new land, because they had been divorced from the land, they were transferred to a new land, they still had to have Yehuda ruling over them. It always had to be Yehuda. And that's why I think that when Messiah was rejected from the land of Yehuda, that he was embraced in the land of Israel as king. And so yeah, so in terms of two at once, yeah, that's really interesting. And I haven't done enough of a deep dive on this to answer that question. There were clearly, I think, Melchizedek's on the earth while there were Levites on the earth. I think, especially if, according to Second Enoch, it says that the final Melchizedek, which we know is Messiah, would be the last of a 12th. So that means there were 11 before him. Yeah, who were those people? Right? They would have been contemporaries of Levite priests. So I don't know. That's a really good question, and that's a good study. Guys, just so you guys know, it is starting to get late. It's 11:15 here on the Eastern Seaboard. And I have to make the decision as to, I have like a stack of things I could go through, and I have to make the decision, what am I going to present next week, which means I have to start working on it tomorrow. And it's always sometimes it's like, oh man, I have like 10 things I want to do at once, but I have to make a decision.